on now to the second amendment to the 31st Amendment. Allows the greffier to read the second amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B8, substitute the words £250,000 of with within. Page 3, paragraph B8, substitute the words should be reserved as a ring-fenced budget line with resources should be made available. Page 3, paragraph B8, substitute the words with this funding not to be drawn from the existing housing budget within the Cabinet Office Head of Expenditure with should it be required.
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and hopefully I can be fairly brief with this one, as I think most of what I would have said was said in the debate on the previous amendment. I was grateful for members rejecting that one and hope that they'll support this one instead. So it's proposed for a very simple reason, that the allocation of funding as proposed in the original amendment is unnecessary. It's also problematic because it asks for ring fencing within an already existing budget as opposed to allocating new money for it, which by definition would mean having to reevaluate all the plans within the Cabinet Office to ring fence funding for something that therefore couldn't be used for something else, but we don't even think we'll spend it at all, which is not an effective way to budget for the Cabinet Office. So I think that's a good enough reason on its own for accepting this amendment. And whilst in the previous amendment I explained why it wasn't necessary to allocate resources for next year, I'll try to reiterate that just in case anybody, if it was unclear in my description of it last time. But finding an effective mechanism or mechanisms to deal with the problem of empty homes in Jersey is not a simple task, because homes can end up being empty for all sorts of different reasons for which a single mechanism may be completely useless for some of those. Some are empty because they've been inherited by the distant relatives of the previous owner and nobody really knows who they are or where they are, and they might even not know that they have inherited a property. It can be inherited by multiple distant relatives who among themselves can't agree what to do with it because they all have a stake in it. And at the other end of the spectrum, there could be people who own properties who are just not very active in using them appropriately and probably don't really have a good reason for it, but it's their property and that's what they've chosen to do with it. Reason for a home being empty might not be applicable for others. Early on in this, I had thought that some kind of empty property tax would be the best way forward, and that could serve as an effective mechanism for discouraging homes being left empty. That is not necessarily something we could do very quickly, and I do remember having helpful conversations with the chair of the Comité de Conotab about looking at whether the rate system could provide a platform for that, and I think our initial conclusion is that it's not completely easy, and if we did want to use that, we'd have to think a bit more long and hard over it. But that mechanism would be useless for bringing back homes into use that are already owned by people, but they don't necessarily know that they own it. A higher tax on those properties would achieve nothing because they're not going to pay it anyway because they don't even know they own the property. So there are things we could do. As time has gone on, I've kind of thought that perhaps some system for empty dwellings management orders could be a useful tool there, whereby an authority of some sort in Jersey would have the right to take over the use of a home that's been identified as empty for a long time without an obvious owner, refurbish it, put it into use, and then if the owner does turn up, you could hand the property back to them along with the bill for refurbishing it, or say we'll carry on, we'll hold on to it until the money made out of renting it covers the cost of refurbishing it, and then hand it over to them. There's all sorts of things you could do there, and in moving forward on those, it would not be a quick thing to do and would certainly not be up and running next year, even with the best will in the world. So I think that the best option is next year, in among the other policy work that we're set to do, bearing in mind that there's an event halfway through next year that could disrupt what the priorities are for the housing portfolio and what policies are adopted. That in among that work, some basic work is done to identify, in the first instance, which of those options could be pursued. And then if resources needed later to actually get those up and running, that will be a discussion for the 2027 budget, if that's what the political will of the then States Assembly deems it to be. But for now, sir, for next year, I believe what would happen if funding was allocated in the way that the panel is proposing, I believe what would happen to it is the exact same thing that happened to the funding that was allocated for this in previous years, which is that a project just didn't proceed quick enough to make use of that funding whilst it was still on the table and ended up being handed back as an underspend at the end of it. So we don't need that funding just yet. The door is open in case we need it for 2027, but let's use next year to work out what that way forward is. And we can do that with my officers, and my successor, whoever that may be, may well have that opportunity as well. And if there's a need for further resources, we come back in the future for that, and that's why I hope members will accept this amendment.
Thank you, Minister. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you, sir. The panel, while disappointed that no funding will be ring-fenced for this work, does welcome the fact that the Minister has finally acknowledged the need to move forward on long-term empty homes. That recognition is long overdue. Therefore, we accept Com's amendment to our amendment and urge members to support it. However, it is remarkable to hear the Minister now say that after 2 years of insisting he could not deliver P48-2022 without additional resources, he is suddenly able to progress work in-house. I would therefore like to ask him in his summing up to explain why this was not set out in his correspondence to scrutiny on his 2026 plans originally, what has changed, and why right up until the budget scrutiny hearing did he repeatedly assert that this work was impossible without extra staff or funding, yet today it is apparently achievable within existing capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the second amendment? Deputy.
So I'd like to go back to the underlying reason why, one way or the other, this work does need to be done, whether that's with extra funding or not. It's going to be done in-house, and I welcome the renewed commitment for the Minister to look at this. Ultimately, it's because if there are the numbers of empty properties out there in the order of what the last census told us, or even half of those, even a fraction of those that could be brought back onto the market, we're still talking about hundreds of properties that would be being used that are not currently being used. And those are houses which we don't need to build, ultimately. They're houses that we don't need to build in town, and they're houses that we don't need to build in the countryside. And it means that for all those properties, those homes that they will be in the future, it means we don't have to have debates about whether they have parking or not. We don't have to have parish meetings about whether or not the drains can sustain those new developments, because those properties are already there. Of course, they may need maintenance. They no doubt will need to be brought up to date, but those homes are already in existence. And so whilst I welcome the Minister's comments that there is an issue here which might require empty management orders on certain types of properties which are owned where the owners are out of the island, I would ask, actually, that we need to know some numbers here, because it would seem to me that there are lots of properties in the island which are empty, which we know exactly who owns them. And the starting point should be, I presume, the rates register. Constables will be well placed, I suspect, in each parish to know exactly which homes are paying their rates or part of their rates, but which are not occupied. So they have an owner but not an occupier. And those properties which have been left empty for, let's say, a starting point of 2 years, should give us a good benchmark. Okay, there's an issue with that property. It's either being left empty deliberately, and whilst the majority of homes will be in St Helier, there's a disproportionate amount of homes that were identified in St Brelard. And I noticed them on the election campaign. And they're not all dilapidated, rundown homes. Some are deliberately being left empty for whatever reason. They're apartments, sometimes they're individual houses, and who knows why they're being left empty, but they're not being lived in. And you can see that from the letterboxes that are full and nobody's going into these properties, because that's what they are, they're properties, they're not homes. And something needs to be done about those, because we do have a small island where we have some would say, draconian housing regulations that stop people from even being able to rent, let alone buy in the island, and that we do have a big demand. And it's something, again, that young people in this assembly, when they've had their debates, they focus on that particular issue. So I do think there needs to be a consensus around the Council of Ministers table to say that actually, whether or not this requires an extra resource, it certainly requires a cross-party working from within the Council of Ministers. And if they were to put some of their, I don't want to say their greatest minds on it, because I think actually there are great minds throughout the civil service, and including within the housing ministerial support team, but if there were to be a bit more political will to say, look, these are the potential mechanisms that we could use, given the fact that there is broad and long-standing consensus within the Assembly that something needs to be done on this issue, then I think that should be the way to do it, sir. And I think we need to bring the Committee to Conatabs in on this, because it may not be the only option, but that has to be one of the starting points, certainly for the gathering of information. And one of the starting points may well be that if you leave a property empty for a certain period of time, you will pay a multiple of your parish rates. And there might be a split, of course, that goes to the parishes. There might be a split that goes to the states in that, and even to the housing department, so to speak. But of course, the ultimate goal of this is not to raise any new taxes. The ultimate goal of this is to act both as preferably as a carrot rather than a stick, to change behaviour and to say that in a small island where housing is in desperate need, it is both inefficient but actually morally reprehensible to leave properties empty long times when those properties can actually be transferred into homes, sir. So I do encourage this minister kindly and politely, and whoever follows him, to get on with the job and to make sure that whatever the mechanisms, because I think it will be mechanisms that are needed to fulfil the underlying pledge that was made in passing this proposition and going back to the scrutiny report, that is ultimately lived up to and delivered on.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Conatabs and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And just following up from the previous speaker, I would say from the point of view of the Comité de Conatable, we are enthusiastic to ensure that empty properties are occupied and they are not left empty. But as the Housing Minister did allude earlier on, there are lots of different circumstances, and I don't think any two are the same. I think from the point of view of the Conatable, we can deal with individual cases the best way we can without getting too involved with the legalities, which inevitably may be the case. But as a first point of contact, sometimes we will have access to the owners, and we'll certainly make the effort to ensure that those properties are dealt with. And I can say so that in the last couple of years I have dealt with one particular case which was a bit of a challenge, and I did have through that process discussions with the Receiver General, because we were at the point of not knowing who the owner was, and he was very obliging and suggested that if the owner couldn't be found, that he would have the ability to take control of the house, get it done up and let, and get an income stream going on until such time as the owner could be found. As it happens, we didn't get to that point, and relatives were located. But I think that maybe the Receiver General may have a part to play in some difficult cases in the future. So I would say that from our point of view, if anybody's got any knowledge of empty premises, please tell us and we'll do what we can help to assist. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatable. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Conatable Greville.
Yes, sir. In his summing up, I'm hoping that the Housing Minister will also bear reference to, anecdotally, there are hundreds of empty single-bedroom flats in the parish of St Helier, many brand new developments that have not been sold. And what are we to do with them? There are some at Westview, there are some in Bart Street, there are some at the old play.com site. We are constantly asked in the planning department for more single bedroom flats, and we ask the developers, why are you building them? Because nobody seems to want them. So I'm hoping that the Minister will give us a lead on how he's aiming to do, what he's going to do with those. Thank you.
Thank you, Tav. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? No one else wish to speak? I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. And just on that very last point, the Councillor Grieville referred to several different sites there, including the old play.com warehouse site. It is fair to say, sir, that whilst there are, at this point, a few unsold there, the bulk of them went extremely quickly. And I can tell you why they went extremely quickly. It's because they're quite nice and they're very reasonably priced. That's why those have gone quickly and why others are struggling. And when I've been looking at homes that are available, looking for completely unconnected reasons, I'm seeing a quality and price that I can well understand why a theoretical prospective buyer wouldn't find too appealing. And that is the ones that he's referring to. I think that's going to be that's going to be a free market solution there, where prices have to more closely align with expectations, and that's a different issue to the homes that have been in existence for generations and have gone through different ownerships, etc. And the chair of the committee referred to the work of the Receiver General, which I was grateful for him for raising that, because I've worked with the Receiver General, who has, I think, been really helpful on this subject, and using the powers that his office has, he has brought an empty home back into use on Belmont Road, which I got to witness the opening of, where they encountered a property and that had been empty for a long time, and have brought it back into use. I was telling some colleagues during the lunch breaks of the good fun that I know the Receiver General has had when trying to locate the owners of empty properties, where he has located one, found that the owners live outside of Jersey, and has sent them a letter with his official seal at the top saying, "Did you know you've inherited a property in Jersey? Would you like to come and claim it?" And those people have taken one look at it and thought it was a scam, until eventually he's turned up at their door and they've gone, "Oh no, this is real," which is quite amusing. But yeah, he has been helpful, and he has certainly been a partner in this until this point. Trying not to get too negative, sir, I am disappointed at the language of the chair of the scrutiny panel, who spoke about the recognition of the importance of this being long overdue. I obviously take exception to that, because I have always recognised the importance of this. I just take a realistic and pragmatic approach, depending on where we are in the work cycle. And so whilst it was true for me to say that I couldn't start and complete projects on empty homes with the resourcing available to me previously, not least because my priority this term of office has been to develop and get past a residential tenancy law. That has been the main aspiration of my tenure, which I'm very pleased to have achieved. I'm actually still not saying that resource won't be necessary to start and finish this project. What I'm saying is that it's not necessary to start it now. It may well be the case that we come back with resource, and that will be for the budget of 27, but earlier on in my tenure, to start and finish a project, yes, I would have needed resource to do that, but we're talking at this point about starting it, and the question of finishing it and resource for that will come later. To start it, at this point, we don't need that resource, because as things have progressed through my tenure, with some projects being successfully completed, others being added, others been reprofiling, depending on how things go, that's an exercise you always do in what your capacity is and how your projects are going at various points. It's our judgment at this moment in time that we'll be able to begin some of that work next year without needing to disrupt much else, but that's not always the case, depending where you are at your point in your term and your other projects going ahead. So on those bases, sir, I hope members will support the amendment, and I call for the appel.
The has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Once the amendment has been adopted, 40 votes for, 4 votes contre. Yes.
Those members voting contre, the Connétable St Clement and Deputies Balash, Wilson and Andrews.
We return now to the debate on the 31st Amendment as amended by the Second Amendment. Does any other member speak on the amendment as amended? No one wishes to speak. I close the debate. Those in favour kindly show.
So we should have
The panel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce that the 31st Amendment as amended has been adopted. 41 votes for, 3 votes contre. Yes.
Those members voting contre, the Connétable St Clement and Deputies Balash and Andrews.
Now move to the 35th Amendment proposed by Deputy Moore. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B8. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5, 1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5.1, A, the head of expenditure entitled Health and Care Jersey should be reduced by £57,207,000. B, the head of expenditure entitled Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture should be reduced by £5,700,000. And C, the head of expenditure entitled Treasury and Exchequer should be reduced by £26,607,000 to maintain net revenue expenditure at 2025 levels for 2026, with any consequential amendments to be reflected as necessary throughout the budget. Page 4, paragraph B12. After the words in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 42 in Table 9, Revenue Heads of Expenditure, A, the head of expenditure entitled Health and Care Jersey should be reduced by £57,207,000 for each of 2026, 2027, 2028 and 2029. B, the head of expenditure entitled Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture should be reduced by £5,700,000 for each of 2026, 2027, 2028 and 2029. And C, the head of expenditure entitled Treasury and Exchequer should be reduced by £26,607,000 for each of 2026, 2027, 2028 and 2029.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the comments of the Council of Ministers regarding this amendment are strong. I would simply say that disregarding the intention of this amendment and not taking action to get a grip on expenditure is, to quote them back at themselves, not either realistic, practical or sensible. And I urge members to consider the facts before them and support this amendment. One can argue that the Council of Ministers has attacked this amendment because the amendment acknowledges and responds to a difficult truth that they're not inclined to confront, that the public sector is still expanding while the private sector has not kept pace. Given that the former is funded by the latter, the position isn't sustainable. The Council of Ministers knows this. The FPP and others have made it quite clear. The question is whether it should be this Council and this State's Assembly to confront the issue, or whether the problem, which is likely to become larger, should it be left for those who are elected in June 2026. This is a philosophical and a deeply political matter, sir, which calls into question the doctrine upon which the island's success over many decades has been achieved. Over recent years, there has been pressure to deliver more and more services, and in my experience, this has not always been achieved in a cost-effective way. Just look at the many recommendations from Controller and Auditor Generals over the period who have urged caution and identified means to provide greater accountability and value for money. We now find ourselves at a crossroads. In the foreword to the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel's report on this budget, the Chair summarises her panel's view of the budget. Jersey cannot afford complacency. This budget exposes the fragility of our public finances and the inadequacy of current planning. During the last government plan, during the debate of the last government plan, Deputy Southern observed, "I believe that this Assembly has seen the first steps on the road to a budget that is led by socialist principles." This budget takes us further along that road, and in responding to the choices that are to be made is a matter of left and right. Do we want to walk further down the road of socialist principles, or do we return to the tried and tested Jersey principles of resourcefulness and fiscal responsibility, spending within our means? This amendment may be demanding, but we need to wake up and take a new road if we are to secure the island's future, and there is no time to waste. The figure of 89 million is a lot of money, but this is the projected increase in revenue expenditure before depreciation. This is less than 9% of the total budget, a target that should be achievable with careful application. It is fully appreciated, sir, that there are some savings identified in the budget, but they do not demonstrate that the government are taking the financial position seriously enough or going far enough in gripping their expenditure. They are, as the Chief Minister has told the media, and I paraphrase here, leaving the next government to deal with the difficult issues. To use the words of the highly respected former Chief Executive of Jersey Finance, who published an article last week titled "Jersey Must Protect Its Advantages Before They Erode," the solution is not austerity, it is discipline, the careful, modern, intelligent kind. Jersey needs to hardwire fiscal responsibility into its governance system so that expansion is measured, justified, and tied to outcomes. Close quote. He then sets out a framework, 5 points, which include productivity before expansion, digital transformation, processes, redesign, and zero-based budgeting. Just like this advice from a well-respected former public servant, this amendment does not call for cuts to services. It calls for a grip on expenditure and a drive for greater productivity. In a small island community, it is vital that we can deliver excellent health and education. People would not want to live or work here if we cannot treat our sick or teach our kids. But sometimes throwing money at something is not the solution. What is required is careful management. I will now set out some areas where this can be achieved. In health, the financial recovery programme should be extended beyond 2026. In the report, I provide an example of savings that could be delivered in the area of women's health. At present, we have people at consultant level who are carrying out minor procedures. If nurses are trained to do those procedures, the time of the consultant is freed up to do other, more complex things, thus reducing their waiting lists. The same principles can apply in many other contexts. There have also been many reports offering clear routes to make savings, such as the Getting It Right First Time report, which looked at orthopaedics and theatre efficiencies, which was published last summer. Our constituents regularly feedback their experiences of using services. One shared first-hand experience with their 89-year-old mother-in-law, who can see that the patient transport service does not work as efficiently as it could or should. Why not work with the parishes, which offer transport assistance to their parishioners? And the parishes can also help to unlock some further efficiencies. One of the time-honoured traditions of our island that has supported the delivery of services to islanders has been through our parish system. There are many opportunities to strengthen those services by harnessing all of the goodwill that remains within those traditional institutions, moulded by our resourceful forebears, and harness the concept of voluntary service. Duplication. One piece of work that was commissioned under my government was a Great Repeal Bill. This removed old legislation and regulations, the red tape that is unnecessary both in time to administer and the costs that are being incurred. Sadly, it was of course not brought to this assembly. The Chief Executive has described the public service as having an additive culture. New stuff is constantly added, but not enough thought is given to the things that government still does that it could either do differently or stop doing altogether. Why, for example, are we still retaining a tourism law under which civil servants are checking whether hotel rooms have lockable doors that are readily numbered or otherwise identifiable and that their decor is of a satisfactory standard? Retaining the policing of beaches Jersey regulations of 1959, which restricts beach trading, but in a way that seems to make it easy for incumbent operators to carry on doing what they've always done, but which doesn't seem to allow scope for new market entrants to compete. Or there's maintaining the annual cafe registration scheme in the places of refreshment Jersey law 1967, when we adopted a new food law just 3 years ago. Or running a ships registry that has well over 1,000 ships on it, but where the clear majority are overseas owned, rarely or even never visit Jersey, and which generate risk for government, for example, the States of Jersey Police, which might be called upon to investigate any serious crimes that are committed on board such a ship while in international waters, but with little or no qualified economic benefit to Jersey. All of these were the responsibility of the Chief Minister when he was formerly Minister for Economic Development. All of these functions appear to have been left alone for the last decade or more. And that's just examples from one of the smaller departments. Performance management. Despite the good work of the previous States Employment Board, which focused on this matter under the Constable of St John, who encouraged greater effort to be put into performance management. Time and time again, this was an area that was considered too time-consuming. I can give an example, sir, if I may, when I raised a concern regarding a person who was clearly not performing in their role. I was told, yes, we know they're not good at their job, but we cannot move them. This wasn't a junior person, sir. How many other people are underperforming in their roles whilst their managers don't have the time to deal with it? If there were 9 or 10 of those people, that could save £1 million a year right there. And let's not forget their 16% pension contributions. Many of the proposals set out in this amendment are known to government already. They may have been on the too difficult pile, but given the state of our finances, it is time to grasp the nettle and put the sustainability of the island's finances ahead of those organisations which might be impacted. Take the arm's length organisations, for example. Some, but not all, have a remunerated board, each costing about £120,000. If there is a professional and capable executive in place, why can they not report to one effective and professional board that provides oversight to a number of organisations who all share synergies? That may appear to be small beer, sir, but one of the reasons that we find ourselves in a position where the budget is greater than the projected income is a result of not paying sufficient attention to the smaller sums and demanding a more efficient way of working. One of the reasons a private sector chief executive was recruited was to bring that leadership to the organisation to drive forward a new approach. Technology. Businesses all over the world are focused on harnessing technology to deliver greater productivity. In recent years, over £100 million has already been spent on technology projects aimed at doing just that for the public sector. Yet this budget identifies a further 80 million plus to spend with only a small amount of projected savings. New service lag. The Health Minister has claimed that this amendment will prevent him from delivering new services. This is not true. This amendment asks him to get a grip on his existing expenditure and deliver better value for money for islanders. It also recognises that growth bids mean doing new things. This means that there is a period of time when new people have to be employed, and there is often a time lag whilst that new service gets up and running. This means that the money is not required on the 1st of January. In fact, governments often struggle to spend all of the growth money in the first year. So, rather than shroud waving that we hear from the Council of Ministers in their comments, why don't they take a proactive approach instead and consider offering training and development to some people who are already in the organisation who could be redeployed to work in new service areas rather than taking on new people? The previous government was accused of trying to do too much and achieving too little. And of course, we're also accused of contributing to growth. And I should speak to that, of course. Some of this is set out in my report. There was, of course, a good response to the plan that was set out in the first 100 days. Now, I have a great deal of respect for many public servants, particularly those on the front line. The majority demonstrate on a daily basis their commitment to public service, and I thank them for that. But it was difficult to shift the dial, and it was clear that there were key people, a small pocket, who missed the Le Fondre government, who had taken something of a more backseat approach. What has become clearer since leaving government is that there was an element of sabotage going on from within by a small pocket of the very people who were supposed to serve with impartiality. It has been reported back to me, and forgive me for using this opportunity to share this, but I think it's important that it is said, that one such civil servant has told their friends that they are proud to have played a part in bringing the government down. I assume that was the same person who was sending the now Chief Minister information about government meetings that Deputy Farnham would then share with his colleagues on the Corporate Services panel. It does make one wonder what else was going on. Of course, I don't know. If I had the energy, I should, of course, make a complaint. But I would prefer to focus on moving forward in a constructive way and trying to represent my constituents for the time that I have left as a States member. But it wasn't right. What is clear is that certain members of this government wanted power badly. What is not clear is why. What do they want to do with it? Who do they represent? This is, I'm afraid, a do-nothing government. Its objective has been to do nothing other than sign a big contract for the hospital. I am aware that there will be accusations that my figures aren't accurate enough or detailed enough, and let me remind members of another observation made by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. Despite well-recognised pressures within the health system, the panel found that the budget does not set out concrete measures to urgently address them, relying instead on longer-term work to develop a sustainable funding model. Recurrent overspends continue to distort expenditure planning. If the Minister, with his team, has not brought to this Assembly concrete measures, how is it possible for a backbencher to do so? The key issue here is that we have a Council of Ministers who have failed to grip expenditure and deliver the promises that were made to the Assembly last year. We were told in January last year that there would be no more reviews, instead there would be action and delivery. Yet, what have we actually got? We were told the Health Advisory Board was too costly, but now we're told that they're wonderful. The Minister relies on them, and in addition, he has created another board costing an additional £70,000 to support him in his work. The previous Health Minister was criticised for not having a health strategy, yet the current Minister has told Scrutiny that now is not the time for a health strategy. Previously, members of this government argued for the protection of the health insurance fund. Now they're proposing plans that will see its value fall dramatically. And so it goes on. As the Corporate Services panel observes, our work has revealed a pattern, a government that speaks of discipline, restraint and sustainability, yet relies on temporary fixes, depleted reserves and structural imbalances to balance the books. The reliance on the Social Security Fund to prop up day-to-day spending is not only unsustainable, but also a breach of the principle of spending within means that the budget itself claims to uphold. End of quote. This is not the action that we were promised last year, sir. What we are seeing is a return to the dither and delay approach that dogged the alliance-led government that our now CM oversaw along with his colleague John Le Fondre. The public did not vote for the status quo, they voted for change. Let's get back to achieving what we set out to deliver in 2022. Let's restore hope to our public and to our business community. Given the tone of the comments and the quotes provided to the media, it's clearly going to be a debate in which the guns will come out to take pot shots at the person rather than dealing with the issue at hand. And so I'd respectfully suggest that before engaging in that sport, ministers would consider very carefully the words of the Corporate Services panel again, whose chair, Deputy Miles, observes, "Jersey cannot afford complacency. This budget exposes the fragility of our public finances and the inadequacy of current planning." Thank you all for listening, and I look forward to the debate.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Minister.
Well, sir, there's a lot in there. Sir, I applaud Deputy Mayor for taking me at my word and bringing forward a proposition that seeks to reduce government spending. She was not, as I said in the last debate, the only one to do so, because actually Deputy Balash also did. But Deputy Balash actually presented a proposition which not only had a proposal, it had a funding mechanism. And I take my hat off to him for putting his head above the parapet and actually bringing forward a solution to something that to which he did not agree. I'm sure that Deputy Mayor, as a very experienced politician, will understand that she proposes such a significant reduction in government budgets that I cannot possibly accept it, nor is it deliverable. This Council of Ministers recognises that the level of growth that we have seen over the last 5 or 6 years is simply unsustainable. We cannot continue to grow at that rate. Accordingly, in this budget, as in the last, we have looked to restrain growth in day-to-day spending while increasing savings to help pay for the essential growth and investment that we can't avoid. We've dispensed with the previous government's growth process, a process that allowed departments and ministers to present hundreds of business cases, seeking both new funding and significant numbers of extra headcount. My memory, I haven't been able to confirm the number, but my memory in 2023 was that the business cases and growth bids involved extra headcount of 600. Many of these proposals were good ideas, but few of them truly affordable without stopping or vastly reducing existing spending and services. That process did not drive efficiency or effective use of public funds. It is laudable, again, that the former Chief Minister sought to stop such a process, and it's commendable that the current government has done so. Instead, we have only considered targeted growth, focused on delivery of the CSP, which was agreed by this Assembly, frontline services, and to mitigate key risks. At the same time, this government has increased levels of planned savings to be delivered by departments, with £40 million planned across 2025 and 2026, and a further target of £29 million in 2027. Some will argue that more action is needed, and I absolutely agree with that sentiment. However, we will achieve more through thoughtful, planned action than rash, knee-jerk reactions. This amendment from Deputy Mayor doesn't just stop new growth and investment. It freezes overall expenditure at 2025 levels, which represents a real terms cut to government expenditure. All inflation increases, including pay awards, would need to be absorbed by departments. No funding would be available to meet pressures and risks that we are already seeing. No investment would be included for the future. This is austerity. In essence, this amendment asks us to make £89 million of unspecified savings in a single year, yet provides less than a month to identify and deliver those savings. I seem to have it at the back of my mind that the Fiscal Policy Panel is not very keen on unspecified savings, and now we've got 89 million of them. While the Deputy has divided the savings between health, economy and treasury, The amounts allocated have no real evidence, no rationale, and no meaningful plan behind them. Such a drastic reduction, a literal decimation of the public service, without any time to plan or consider consequences, will have serious ramifications, including to the front line and services that islanders rely on most. Reducing the budget for Health and Care Jersey by £57 million without any clear justification is not bold, it is financially irresponsible. It risks undermining essential services and reversing years of work to stabilise health provision started under Deputy Mayor's government. As the Council of Ministers comment paper suggests, this level of cut would have a catastrophic impact on the Health and Care Department. I leave the Minister to articulate in more detail what the impact on the health service would be. Similarly, the amendment proposes reductions to the Economy Department, referring specifically to arm's-length bodies. This is without any consultation or impact gathering and leaves the affected organisations and their staff with a high level of uncertainty just before the start of the year. I'm sure the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development will wish to say more on this, but what I would comment is at the Question Time event last week, which was very well attended, not by many politicians, I hasten to add, there was a great groundswell of support in that room for the ALOs and for why some of them had had grant funding cut, and we're wanting to do even more with this amendment. Turning to my own department, in the proposed budget, Treasury has £46.5 million in 2026. If Deputy Mayor's amendment is approved, in 3 weeks, this drops to just under £20 million. That cuts Treasury's budget by over half. And again, just as an aside, we often talk about the front line and what the front line is. And people like the tax help desk and indeed the front of office at ESH are not considered by many to be the front line. But if you go and ask them how many customers, they are dealing with thousands and thousands of customers every year. Tens of thousands of customers speak to them every year. And you can bet your bottom dollar that the minute they get a poor service, they're on the phone complaining about it. Absolutely, they're on the front line and absolutely they get no recognition for that fact. I acknowledge, running back to Treasury, I acknowledge that the Deputy's intention is for these savings to be redistributed across other departments through my ability to make transfers between heads of expenditure. While this is possible, members will all be aware that transfers between heads of expenditure are required to sit before the Assembly for 4 weeks. I believe it's also the case that I cannot simply move money between heads of expenditure without consulting with the relevant ministers and seeking their agreement. And if I didn't have their agreement, then I imagine we would be debating. Because taking money from some departments that other members are seeking to protect or indeed grow, any change would undoubtedly be called in for debate, delaying any transfers further. This would cause artificial pressures from within Treasury, which is not helpful when trying to ensure the overall public purse stays within budget. Given the amount of time the proposer has taken to prepare this amendment has been short, it is not entirely surprising that there is limited detail. Rather, they have slashed health, Treasury and economy. Indeed, producing a more detailed, thought-through plan would take more time than that. However, the amendment gives no more time to the government to deliver a plan before the beginning of the year. So those members who have attended the States Members' workshops established by the Chief Minister will know that we have done a lot of work to understand where the growth over the last few years has been generated. We are now looking closely at how that growth in the public service can be constrained and reduced, and we will be presenting further to States Members on this in the new year. So at this point, I'm going to diverge from my speech because I do have a couple of things I would like to say, both in terms of this and the debate recently. The Deputy, there was a huge amount of information in there, in her speech, a huge amount of ideas as to where savings could be made and spending cut. She has referenced laws that have existed from the 1950s. Why did her government not do anything to deal with those laws? She makes a very easy swipe at civil servants and the 16% pension contribution. That's all they get. They don't get health insurance. There are no other perks. They get a salary and a pension. And really, I think the fact that we continue to just beat them over the head about pension contributions is really, really quite unfair. They do work hard. I don't recognise, if Deputy Moore is unhappy about things that happened in the past, then the appropriate way to do that is to raise a proper complaint and deal with it through appropriate channels. I don't know what she's talking about, but just to put almost anonymous complaints out there about civil servants and not go through a proper process when nobody can address them through proper channels, I feel is inappropriate. Coming back to the budget, sir, Deputy Stevenson, who I imagine is online at the moment, said this morning she didn't know what was worse, being criticised or being told that your work was good, but we weren't going to do it. Sir, criticism, I can tell you, is not a comfortable place, because I've had it for weeks of criticism about everything we do. And I don't mind criticism, I really don't. But nobody ever recognises the good work. Nobody has said, yes, it's good that money's going into health. Nobody is recognising that we're putting money into childcare to help the economy and get people back into work and grow the economy. Nobody is suggesting, nobody has said, yes, it's a good idea that we build children's homes for our vulnerable children. If you look at the headline in the JEP today, do we really want children going to Lamoy because there is no acceptable accommodation for them? We've done all of these things. We haven't been given any credit, but all we've had is criticism. How dare you cut the state's grant? How dare you not put money in strategic reserve? How dare you not live within your means? Nobody really has come up with any plans. We have produced savings, and look what's happened. You've bounced two of them. No, we don't like you cutting environment. No, we don't like you cutting the police. And they're not cuts, they're just rational decisions that the council minister signed up to try to live within our means. If you're going to criticise, it'd be quite nice if you could come up with some alternative solutions. Deputy Reniff seems, it'd be quite interesting if Deputy Curtis' programme, a new site, could work out how many times Deputy Reniff has mentioned the FPP's comments on the state's grant. The FPP made quite a number of comments, but nobody's dealing with any of those. Deputy Reniff could have brought a proposition to reduce the formula-driven growth in arts, heritage and culture. We tried to do that last year and the Assembly didn't like it. That was an FPP recommendation. If you're going to hold the FPP report up, you have to address all of it. We are trying our best. And I will ask the question that I said at the question time event. It was a very big room. There was lots of people there. And I said, who would like to pay more tax? Not a single hand. I returned to the question later. Who would like to pay more tax? One person put their hand up and said, I'll pay more tax if I knew where it was being spent. Now, I don't think there's any question where money's being spent, and I do absolutely agree that there are lots of areas of unwise spending. Deputy Balash mentioned some of them the other day. A public standards ombudsman will be a money pit. That will cost government, I suspect, way more than the 1.5 million that Deputy Balash mentioned. It is not an effective means. We are a small population of 100,000 people, and we have to stop creating bodies that are independent, because before you know it, they're jumping up wanting more money all the time. That has got to stop. We all have our part to play, and we all need to either stop bringing propositions that spend more money, because nothing in these amendments are really cutting cost apart from Deputy Moore's. None of it are stopping savings, it's just moving money around. So if you're going to criticise government, come forward with some solutions, but nobody's doing that. It's your job to make savings, it's your job to do this, it's your job to do that. You have responsibility as well as members of this Assembly, and I think it's time you started living up to those responsibilities. And if you don't like what we're doing, bring forward some suggestions. I don't, unlike some, I don't support party politics. I don't think it would be good for the island. I think it would make it even more divisive than it already is. But we seem to be in a kind of worse situation where we have people acting as a kind of informal opposition which exists to criticise, but formal opposition is bring forward plans. They bring forward plans. Kemi Badenoch stands up and says Labour are useless, we don't like what they're doing, but she offers an alternative. She offers an alternative that people could vote on. We're not being given alternatives. If you want to be in opposition, be in opposition. That's your right in a democratic assembly. But do the job properly and bring us some solutions. So, I'm going to return to my speech. Having had a bit of a rant. Sir, in the meantime, this amendment does not present a credible plan. It's not bold action. It's a blunt instrument which would derail the strategic priorities this Assembly is committed to and have significant adverse impacts across the public service. And I urge members to reject it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I didn't expect. And I put my light on because I do believe there are several things that me and the Treasury Minister would agree, and I would like to support her, then probably less that we disagree. And this is why it's important that I will speak, because I do believe that, and this is where we agree, we need to get grip on our expenditure and increase productivity. This is what Deputy Moore suggested, this is what the Treasury Minister suggested, and this is what I would echo. I do believe that we need to invest in health, and I'm welcoming investment in the children, in the childcare. I'm not opposing it, and I'm actually saying it's great move forward. Where I think the difficulty lies, and maybe it's also for the Treasury Minister, I mean, if the Assistant Treasury Minister can respond to this, will be possible. Unfortunately, the Treasury Minister spoke about it. Where the difficulty lies that when we talk about investing in health, which I fully support, we don't know how this investment will be spent. It's not about not investing, it's about how you're doing things with this money and what will be delivered, what will be the outcome, and how you will do things differently. And unfortunately, during the Public Accounts Committee public hearings, when Public Accounts Committee challenged officers what they're doing differently, how we can deliver better service based on new technology, different contracts, walking through different models, we didn't hear any new ideas except of let's have theatres full. And again, let's invest in health, but it needs to be different thinking and different types of investment. Council of Ministers telling us that finances are tight and offer little detail how savings will be made. Again, not to recruit people because we couldn't manage to recruit permanent position, it's not saving. Yes, obviously on the balance by the end of the year it will show. I don't know, and this is again, the Treasury Minister talked about the opposition. I came to this debate openly. I'm not entirely sure that I can support numbers that were proposed because I believe it didn't include inflation. And I believe there are several other questions around the numbers that I challenged Deputy Moore openly about it. And this is why I cannot be called here as an opposition because it wasn't developed with me. I have problem with the numbers and I have question around the numbers. But it doesn't mean that the point is not made in principle. And I cannot dismiss the points that were highlighted. Treasury Minister, during that debate, it was very interesting and a very good public debate, but it's 100% clear that the Treasury Minister cannot have the final, actually the Chief Minister cannot have the final word in this Council of Ministers because they work according to the different model. I think, in my vision, it needs to be final word when the funds needs to be balanced and what it will be spent on and how we will overspend or not overspend. And if we are mentioning 2023, yeah, there are lots of growth, but 2023 compared to 24, and compared to 2025, end up in black, didn't add up with overspending. So at this stage, with information before us, I struggle to see how I can support amendment, but also I believe that Deputy Moore has raised questions that ministers have failed to answer, and those questions remain valid. And I will continue to listen to this debate with open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. Thank Deputy Miller for inviting me to speak and responding to her invitation, sir. But I think that's appropriate, as obviously Deputy Moore's amendment does bring a direct request for savings from my department. It is difficult not to levy really the same criticisms that Deputy Miller, Minister for Treasury, levied. When you read through the proposition, it is scant in terms of evidence. And in terms of the 5.7 million that is being asked for from the Department of the Economy, and most specifically the local economy, as opposed to the financial services side of it, it doesn't actually say where, it just talks about the merging of ALOs. Now, there's a number of things I can say about that. First of all, one thing I can say is that whilst I have been working on looking at how we can best and most efficiently organise the arm's length organisations, were you to merge them all, the savings would not reach 5.7 million. 5.7 million would be the absolute withdrawal of, well, put it this way, 2 digital jerseys and 1 jersey business is what you would need to take out of the budget in order to do that. And so the work that digital jersey business and much of Visit Jersey would have to be taken out. And so you would not only be massively harming the tourism economy, but as far as the kind of innovation and the investment side of bringing business to Jersey is concerned, I think it would have a really harmful effect on that as well. I think, as I said, there is work to be done in reorganisation, but I think what needs to happen in that situation is that you don't just withdraw most of the money that supports them, is that you reorganise those organisations so that they can deliver better for a similar or possibly slightly less amount of money, but not a sum of money that effectively, as I said, would take out 2 digital jerseys and 1 jersey business. The other elements that I do wish to speak to are the kind of tone around the arm's length organisations. I think one of the things that I've been most disappointed about, and I blame myself for this, is the narrative around arm's length organisations in this assembly. And the reason I blame myself isn't because I agree with that narrative, it's because I disagree with the narrative. But I clearly haven't been defending them in a way that people understand. One thing I've really learnt over the last 8 years in the assembly is that, and particularly the last 3.5 years as Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, is that government, most particularly the civil service, does not really talk the same language as business. To be honest, it doesn't even keep the same hours. And it does not operate at the same speed, and it does not understand the same considerations and same concerns. That's why, time and again, I see, whether it's tender processes, health and safety forms and policies, administrative burdens being placed onto business that are absurd, duplicative, and utterly time and money wasting. The whole point of having the arm's length organisations is that they can operate outside of that environment and speak and engage directly with the private sector. That means a private sector internationally, and so a private sector that really expects something quite special from Jersey and a really deep understanding of what international business is. And it also means a private sector that feels that locally it is understood and communicated with in an appropriate manner. My belief is, having spent 3.5 years as Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, is that the civil service is not best placed to do that. The civil service around these areas is very good at the policy side, the legislation side. It is very good at dealing with the arm's length organisations who can repeat the message from the private sector and then translating that into something that the civil service is very good at, then translating something into something that can be used politically, whether it's new legislation, new policy, etc., and so on. But we need those arm's length organisations, because were we to get rid of them, I think there would be an absolute breakdown in communication between government and the private sector in all its areas. And so to just ask for £5.7 million of savings from the arm's length organisations, I think would be very short-sighted, would cause immeasurable harm to the economy of the island, because it would, I think, put a massive wedge between the government and the private sector. With regard to health and the Treasury savings, I can't speak to them directly other than to know, obviously, when you read the report, there is very little evidence as to why, as to what the impacts would be. There's no real understanding as to what harms would be done or created by those cuts. It could be argued that, well, it would just be the lack of investment. But as Deputy Gardner has just said, we do need to invest in these areas. Do I believe that they are areas which can also, be run more efficiently? I'm sure that's the case. But I am not in a position to be able to say where and how. And that is left to those ministers to do so. But to argue for 57 million, a withdrawal of 57 million of expenditure from the health service and a withdrawal, or was it 20-something million from the Treasury side, without actually understanding or providing an explanation for how the impacts would be felt and what the benefits would be of those impacts, I think means that this amendment cannot stand. And I do definitely suggest and urge all members to reject this amendment. I say all this, though, with an understanding that I do subscribe to the view that Jersey's overall cost of government is rising too fast, too quickly. And that as we head towards an election, I think it will be those members who speak to that who will likely be most successful. Because I think islanders, and there's a reason for it as much as anything, we have a 20% tax rate. That means you can only do so much. And we do need to understand that we cannot deliver all of the health solutions, we cannot deliver all of the economic solutions, we cannot deliver all of everything that everybody in Jersey would like. And what we need are states members who are willing to put a line in the sand and say, no, we would love to deliver that, but we can't. Maybe we can use the UK, maybe we can use France to help us deliver that from a health perspective. Maybe we can use and work with Guernsey to deliver it, to reduce costs. These are questions that need to be answered. And I would hope that when a new government is delivering a budget in a year's time, sir, that they are really looking at the issue of the cost of government in Jersey and making deeper inroads than we are at the moment. But we do need to invest in health, and we do need to invest in very many other areas of government, not least the public realm and other areas of infrastructure, which are absolutely vital, because if we don't invest in these areas, then Jersey will no longer be attractive, not just to tourists, but it won't be attractive to people wishing to live here either. And so investment is needed, and a proposition or an amendment to the government plan which just talks for cuts without any real understanding of what those cuts will do, I think is dangerous and should therefore be rejected, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, sir. This has been my favourite amendment so far, and I'm sure that there are other members that have felt that way too. Now we're really getting going. This is a proper budget debate now, and I want to say, just as it's getting good, yeah. Sir, I want to start actually by thoroughly commending Deputy Moore for her speech and for bringing this amendment, because as a former Chief Minister, she has an experience and perspective that is absolutely of interest to those of us with an interest in the governance of the island to hear from and hear about how she thinks things have gone and how things could have been differently, etc. And I also commend her for putting forward an amendment and an argument which she knows lots in the room will have found uncomfortable to hear, and which inevitably is setting her up to get rebuttals from others, which can sometimes be uncomfortable to listen to as well. So I absolutely commend her for all of that, even though I think almost everything she said was wrong. And so I want to talk about some of that, but there was one phrase that she used that I did find particularly ironic. She described, looking back on the formation of the current government, it being about some who wanted power but didn't really know what to do with it. And the reason that that struck me is because I spent 2 years hearing people say the exact same thing about her government, because the point must be made, sir, in relation to this amendment, that at the start of this electoral term, the proposer of this amendment had an absolutely golden opportunity to set the groundwork for dealing with lots of the issues that she's now raising, and that opportunity was completely squandered. And it was squandered for multiple reasons, but I'm of the view that it came about as a government that had no vision for what Jersey ought to look like, that itself was a coalition made up of many who themselves wanted power but didn't know what to do with it. And I won't be uniquely critical of Deputy Moore for that, because I think that is institutionalised in our politics, that we deliver governments that are not capable of delivering on a vision, and that is why spending keeps going up, and that's why things are so unaccountable, because our members of government are mostly unaligned when it comes to their manifestos. They have no obligation to back one another. They have no obligation to hold each other to account. They can have a government promoter position and then outside of the room when speaking to conditions can completely absolve themselves of it. And that is why we end up in the situation where public spending can often become so wasteful. But so working within that framework as best as we are, I cannot accept what the proposer of the amendment says when she describes this as a do-nothing government, because I think this government has grasped the nettle on some key issues and is dealing with things that previous governments absolutely failed on. So this is the government, after years of talking, that has delivered a new residential tenancy law supporting renters in the island, where others in the past ran round in circles unable to achieve it. This is the government that is introducing 3 hours of childcare for 2 to 3-year-olds, something that is going to be absolutely uplifting for so many parents and families, and of course the children at the heart of it as well. And that will be great for our economy and great for our society. This is the government that, after over a decade of some of us banging our heads against the wall on the subject of the living wage, is now taking the biggest strides towards that than any of our predecessors before, and that is because of the commitment of the Chief Minister, of the Social Security Minister, and all of us around the Council of Ministers table who decided that action was necessary. And it's a shame he's not in the room, but I was also going to give a shout out to Deputy Morell, who has, in the last few days, lodged his licensing law, something that is decades overdue, and if the Assembly accepts it, that will be another thing to tick off the list of something that successive assemblies and governments didn't deliver, but this one hopefully will have. So we're not in the position that the Deputy argues when calling for this amendment, and we're certainly not in the position that she suggests when she was quoting another member calling a previous budget, the first one led by socialist principles. And this point does need to be made, sir, because the word socialism has a dictionary definition. It's not a synonym for whatever I don't like. So what it means is from each according to their ability to each according to their need. It's the principle, sir, that the state ought to work in partnership with its population to create a society in which everyone is capable of achieving their potential, irrespective of their background, their race, their religion, and their social class. That's what it means. Those are good principles, ones which I hold dear. I know many of my colleagues in government don't agree with those, but in the interests of Jersey, we work together to find the compromises we can to take things forward. And I'm very pleased that this budget seeks to do that. But we have to contend with the fact, sir, that if this amendment is adopted, it will put government in chaos. It can do no other thing other than that, where we give our public service merely weeks' notice that literally tens of millions of pounds will be swept from beneath their feet, disrupting all sorts of work and causing all sorts of damage in the meantime. And that is, in a sense, a shame, sir, because the underlying point that the Deputy makes about government spending being unsustainable, being out of control and consistently rising is right, and everyone agrees with that, including the socialists, who also believe that too. But sir, unlike the other wings of politics in Jersey, we are the ones with the proposals to actually deal with it by restructuring how our democracy works in Jersey so we don't constantly go round in circles every budget on this without dealing with it. So we are the ones who say that we can drastically reduce public spending in Jersey by eliminating the waste that is caused by the institutionalised, fragmented politics delivered by our system of independence. We're the ones who say that we can enhance our economy and therefore the prosperity that's generated and the tax take we get through enhancing the economic participation of those who are currently held back in our society from reaching their potential. And yes, sir, we include in that tax reforms. That, sir, does not mean tax rises, it means tax reforms. It means some going up, some going down, depending on what is most appropriate for our economic and social needs. That, sir, is a different way of doing government. I dare say, sir, that's a better way of doing government. It's the one that we promote, and it's one that our mission is ongoing, but that I have faith one day will be achieved. But it certainly won't be achieved by supporting this amendment, however much I commend the proposer for bringing it in the spirit she did. And I thank her for livening up this debate.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Scott.
Thank you. Sir, it is the last budget before the election, so a number of States members might wish to stand on a soapbox at this moment or to restore their standing in the community. Containing public spending was one of the platforms for my manifesto. So I recognise that Deputy Moore's proposition is overall well-intentioned, that there are some people in the community who think, well, why do we keep not grasping the nettle? Why do we not just simply turn around to the public sector and say, this is how much you're going to have, deal with it? However, these measures do seem draconian, and I think that they precede some necessary work that does need to be done within government, and which I do hope from my position on the sidelines of the council ministers that I might help along with the help of the other members in the States Assembly. Deputy Stevenson and Deputy Miller have vented feelings in the States Assembly, and I do find it somewhat ironic that as an assistant minister and a States member, I'm subject to 2 codes of conduct that suppress my powers of speech, particularly not to criticise the States Assembly or the council ministers. That's how it goes. But it also suppresses my ability to vent certain feelings and views. But I did feel somewhat aggrieved that there's been suppression of an economic impact assessment report in the case of the residential tenancy law. It seems to have been. It's still not been published. And I think that should have been. Now, I think we all agree that investment of public funds needs to be done wisely. And public sector growth, I do believe, needs to be curbed. And so I agree with Deputy Morell that that is something that anybody standing on the next election needs to speak to. He mentioned the argument for arm's length organisations. What I would like to mention is the struggle that can go on within the civil service in managing arm's length organisations. And the reason for that is what I would call a lack of performance management culture, as I recognise it. As many people who work or have been in the private sector might recognise it. I note that there has been an argument in favour of public sector pensions and that some members of the Council of Ministers are in receipt of one. So I feel, nevertheless, that I cannot support this proposition because it does not actually, it creates perhaps more problems than it solves, but I do recognise where it comes from. I believe that as states members, we should all be managing performance, and that includes within scrutiny. Maybe we need to challenge a bit more spending, whether you're the PPC and you're talking about the cost control and the state's growth, and then there needs to be more opportunity for scrutiny to look at some of the finer detail of public spending. What happened to the audit committee that once we used to have, where people would actually look a little more closely into public sector spending? Because I really cannot support a line of management that is so high level that it just says, oh, we're going to reduce all your department's expenditure by X%, without looking at performance management generally. So I won't be supporting the proposition in line with the Council of Ministers' position, but as I say, I can accept the frustration from which this comes.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I feel I have to stand in defence of some of the people I work with day in, day out. It's been an absolute eye-opener for me to walk in and take on this role and work with the civil servants I work with, because I've found them, sir, to be professional, supportive. We have a culture in the department around the ministerial table where everybody has the right to speak, and I want to know whether the decisions I'm making are really bad decisions, because these are professionals who have been in this role a long time. And I think the civil servant baiting that goes on day in, day out, and some sort of austerity-based hysteria over the way to save this island, sir, is to in some way just lose everybody in the public sector and then everything will be fine. That is not just short-sighted, it is incorrect. Some of the growth, sir, in education has been in teaching assistants, frontline staff, 200 who go into schools every day and support our most challenging and needy children, because we recognise the need that they have. We recognise that if we are going to include those young people in our society in the future, we need to give them the support from day one. That's where some of the growth is, and I'm quite happy to stand here and talk about that growth. In fact, even the word growth, it's need. So education is the basis of a modern society, and we have increasing demands all of the time. We're open about them. We're open about the increasing need and recognition of special educational needs. We're open about the increasing changes to the demands made at every single classroom and the expectations. And so I mentioned as well about pensions. Why are people anti-people receiving a pension? If we have people receive pension when they retire, they can pay their way and they have a standard of living and make less of a demand financially long term. It's a sensible thing to do. There's a younger generation growing up. So I joke with my son, he's a smart lad, very smart lad, doing his research and his biotechnical research, etc., way beyond me. And I say to him, one day you'll get a pension. I'll explain what that is to you, Tom, because you won't have a clue about it. And there's a real worry that the narrative behind this is fundamentally wrong. We are criticising the wrong people for the wrong reasons at the wrong time and in the wrong way. This is not what brings an island together. This is not what brings a workforce together. And this is not what enables us to challenge the future. And so I'm glad Deputy Mezek gave a definition of the term socialism. It's not an insult to me, sir. It's about what we need for our society. And if politically, sir, people want to gather together openly and honestly about their political allegiances and work together, party politics is the way forward. Form a proper opposition, an opposition that gives genuine alternatives, an opposition that doesn't at the last minute make last minute changes to pieces of work that have been going on for a long, long time in order to throw more money at something that it doesn't need. And that's where we are with some of the propositions, amendments that have come forward. So, sir, this is not a small. People are being polite, and I will try to be polite. And I agree, this is a proper debate. It's quite nice, actually. I thank the Deputy for that. It gives us a chance to stand up. And so this isn't about political grandstanding. This is about stand up and say, what do you believe in this assembly? What do you believe in? And we may disagree, but politically, show what you believe in. Be open about it. If you are working collectively with groups of people, you are working as a political party. Declare as a political party. Show what your beliefs are. Give your references. Give your funding. Give everything that makes you what you are working collectively, and come forward together and stand on that platform. That's what we need at the next election. Clarity, clear manifestos, and clear messages for the future. And so that's what we will bring again. We've done it consistently, and that's why we've built to move forward. But finally, sir, I would say these will not just affect the departments that are mentioned in the comments paper, because that level of removal of funding across the department will hit everybody. It will hit education, it will hit health, it will hit every single sector that we have. It'll also say to a workforce, you are not valued. So when I picked up this role, I picked up a workforce that was told you are not valued and we're actually on strike. We don't have that. We haven't had that for nearly 2 years, and we are still repairing the damage that was done to try and say you are a valuable workforce. It's still not there. I recognise that, but we are trying. So I urge every member to reject this, not simply because of the numbers, but because of the narrative and the principles that lie behind it that are fundamentally incorrect for this island and this assembly. Thank you, sir.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Tom Binney.
Sir, 3 weeks before the start of the new year, Deputy Moore is proposing to reduce the 2026 budget by almost £90 million. Apparently, with only hours to prepare, this saving can be achieved by reorganising the structure of the organisation at a high level and developing a culture of high performance that harnesses technology and merges some functions. And by adopting the changes outlined in the amendment, we can anticipate that this new way of working will become embedded across the organisation and drive continuing efficiency in other areas of government. So I think these ideas are very laudable, and it may surprise the Deputy to learn that I actually support them in principle. Much restructuring is still required, more savings can be made, and technology must be applied wherever possible. However, sir, the idea that these far-reaching objectives can be achieved simply and in the time frame suggested demonstrates a worrying level of naivety and very little understanding of the way in which these changes have to be approached. But more frightening for me, sir, is the judgment, or lack of it, involved in identifying the targets selected for the proposed savings. As already explained by the Deputy, by far the biggest part of this grand plan is a staggering reduction in the health budget of some 57.2 million. Given my current involvement in this area, I'd like to correct some of the many inaccuracies contained in the amendment and inform members of the likely consequences of adopting it. Whilst the amendment asserts that the Assembly is now being asked to allocate an additional £66 million for 2026 health and care, it fails to mention that some £22 million of that sum is simply a transfer of costs from other departments, principally ambulance, public health, 40+ members of staff from the IT department, and other smaller numbers from elsewhere. So this is not new money. It also includes almost £10 million to cover the annual cost of living pay increase for all health staff. Once again, rather difficult to define as new money. Another 12.5 million of the supposed 62 million reflects a cost of living increase for non-staff expenses, albeit that this is now calculated at 3% over inflation rather than last year's plus 2%. But in relation to the overall sums involved, the additional funding amounts to less than a 1% increase in the health budget. So, as members may know, in recent years of higher inflation, the health service cost of living increase was set well below the real inflation rate, and as a consequence, the service proceeded to run what was described unhelpfully as an overspend. For a number of years, this was made good at the year end, and Deputy Moore will be well aware of this because in her period of tenure as Chief Minister, she supplemented the health budget by £14.4 million in 2022 and a further £32 million in 2023. And I think I should repeat that, that's £32 million, so in spite of the Deputy's apparent abilities as a reformer. 2024 saw a lower supplementation of 28 million, and in 2025, it reduced again to 12 million. Fortunately, sir, rampant health inflation and the rapid and costly improvement in treatments, drugs and equipment have at last been recognised as a reality. So £12 million is now being added to next year's budget in advance in order to give the health team a more honest chance of coming through within budget at the end of 2026. So once again, this is no more new money than the sums that the Deputy herself applied to supplement the service's budget in previous years. In any event, whatever funds are applied to health, they are all wholly dependent on the service achieving £9 million worth of savings in 2026. So this increase is much lower than it appears, and once again, this small balance can hardly be definable as new money. Taken together, the figures described demonstrate that the actual health budget increase proposed for 2026 is not £60 million, as claimed by Deputy Moore, but is instead approximately £15 million over inflation. That's £8 million for digital development, £4 million for preventative health measures, and an additional £3 million to help with higher health inflation and to assist with delivering the additional treatments and drugs that will become available over the next 12 months. In addition to these inaccuracies, the Deputy, in a report to the amendment, asserts that the former Health Minister was close to bringing a proposal to the Assembly which would not only have sustained the very savings that we're continuing to deliver, but also a plan to transform the health service into a high-quality, efficient service. I have to tell members that if there was such a plan, it was a very well-kept secret. Indeed, unless everyone within the health service has been less than honest with me, not one of them was able to point me to any substantive work in progress, despite numerous inquiries from me when I first took office. Finally, we're informed that in addition to the fictional £60 million overspend, we have no costed workforce strategy and no grip on the spiralling costs associated with the hospital development. Well, I don't believe that we've kept the work currently being done on the workforce strategy a secret, and I'm sure that most of us here are well aware that the hospital project remains within budget almost 2 years after the Deputy's departure from office. So I think if the Deputy was completely honest with herself, even she knows that a reduction of the scale proposed would have catastrophic consequences. No cost of living increase for staff, a huge reduction in services, no investment in a digital system that's been rated at 0 in the internationally recognised HIMSS scale, no investment in preventative health measures, and additional spending cuts of £22 million to fund the recently transferred ambulance service. So it's just too hideous to contemplate. So I think I'll conclude now by saying that if any member of the Assembly thinks that improving financial control in 2026 is best achieved by savaging the health budget to the tune of £57 million, it will take a better man than me to persuade them otherwise. I think I'll leave it there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? No one else wishes to speak. I call upon Deputy Moore to reply. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir, and I thank all of those who've spoken. I think there have been some very thoughtful and considered speeches, and as Deputy Mezek rightly observed, it is important and healthy, actually, for us all to engage with the issues at stake and our political approaches to them. Without, I think, going into the detail of each and every speech, and I am quite aware of what the result of this vote will be when we get to it. I think it is important to have had this conversation. It is important to raise these issues because there is a huge amount of concern out there in the public. We need to continue to challenge ourselves, and we need to do better. I would like to just make it extremely clear what I did say about public servants, because I have a huge amount of respect for them, and I thank them all for their public service commitment. I think I would like to say exactly what I did say, just for the avoidance of any doubt. I said I have a great deal of respect for money public servants, particularly those on the front line. The majority demonstrate on a daily basis a commitment to public service. And I gave a simple example of one minor issue with performance management, but surmised that, say there were 10 similar issues across the organisation, then that perhaps could lead to a considerable saving. But sir, when we consider at the heart of this amendment, yes, it is a large amount of money. Yes, it would equal a lot of work and it would be a great challenge. But this is not something that would have to be started on the 1st of January. As I said in my opening speech, this is something where there are reports that sit on dusty shelves. There is work that has been begun, and there would be many weeks to start to move and take a different approach to achieve these savings by the year end. And it would actually be by the year end that we would have to reach the position. It is sometimes necessary to set a challenge to an organisation. I think everybody around the Assembly has acknowledged that we can see the issue at hand. We know what the FPP have said. They have said they're concerned about public debt, which will hit 17% of GDP. They have said they're concerned about spending outstripping revenue. This is on our watch. Agreeing to this budget means that we are saying that is okay. It does not mean that we are taking it in hand and responding to the challenge. So, sir, I think I will end simply by sharing the wise words of the former Chief Executive of Jersey Finance. In a recent article, he wrote, a more disciplined state is not an ideological preference. It is a requirement for Jersey's long-term stability and for future generations who will inherit the decisions that we make today. So, sir, I move the amendment and I ask for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy Moore. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the graphier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the graphier to close the voting. I announce the amendment has been rejected. 2 votes pour, 40 votes contra, and 1 abstention.
Well done, comrades.
Those members voting for, the Conetavis and Bellard and Deputy Moore and Deputy Wilson abstained.
I wonder if the constable will be free for a meeting in 5 minutes.
Now move on to the 23rd Amendment proposed by the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B8, after the words as set out in the appendix to summary tables 5, 1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in summary table 5.1, the head of expenditure for health and care Jersey shall be reduced by £240,000 and the head of expenditure entitled States of Jersey Police shall be increased by £240,000.
Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. This amendment is based on detailed written submissions from the police authority, from many statements made by the police chief and other police officers in many public hearings over the last few years. The Children Education Home Affairs scrutiny work is based on evidence. The reality is that the police force is underfunded. No growth in officer numbers for the last 6 years, while the workload is increasing. During the last few weeks, our police chief has met with the panel and we've had follow-up conversations to discuss this underfunding in more detail. And what we've heard was that new and more complex types of crime are growing exponentially. It's not just the new VAUG offences, in which there's currently a 27% increase in reported crimes. There is all the other extra crime generated through the online world, a growing number of scams and fraud. There are more than 100 registered sex offenders to keep track of. There are the large numbers of children in distress who go missing, which is left to the police to manage. There are new maritime laws, new dog laws. In the words of our police chief, without new funding, it is death by 1,000 cuts. The intention of this amendment is to allow for some interim funding to try and prevent some of the immediate cuts. It's intentionally for 1 year only because we believe that a thorough overhaul of the police budget is necessary, which should take place as soon as possible next year. The nature of many crimes changing and becoming more complex. This year, there has been a massive increase in mental health-related incidents. A thorough review of the police budget for the next few years is very much needed. Without recognition of the changing nature of crime and the workload, there will be more consequential impacts, which we can see now with the numbers of community police being cut from 9 to 6. That's not good news. The original plan was to have 12. The community police provide that bridge for people, especially young people, to see that the police are there to help and protect them. They are also a huge support for the parishes, working with our honorary police. Besides, overall police numbers are lower than many other jurisdictions. For instance, Jersey has 1.9 officers per 1,000 population. The UK average is 2.1, Guernsey 2.2, Isle of Man 2.7, and Gibraltar 7.6. While Jersey is supported by the honorary police, we have to keep in mind that some of the parishes are finding it difficult to recruit more honorary officers, possibly due to today's busy lifestyles. So there is even more pressure on our state's police force. The chef de police has stated that the cut in community police officers will add to the existing strain on the honorary police force. The planned enhancement of the digital forensics unit has been cut by £47,000. The digital forensics unit contributes to approximately 90% of police investigations because nearly all crimes now involve technology, including phones, laptops, and other devices. Digital forensics helps to make savings and speed up the criminal proceedings by generating early guilty pleas and delivering justice to victims more swiftly. Providing insufficient funding for this unit is not cost-effective. It means longer, drawn-out investigations which cost a lot more. And now I quote from the budget submission from the Jersey Police Authority, which is, staff costs account for around £28.5 million, or 91% of total expenditure, leaving very limited flexibility within the remaining budget to absorb operational pressures, cost inflation, or strategic investments. This static funding position means that, once inflation and unavoidable cost growth are considered, the States of Jersey Police will face a real terms decline in available resources over the next 4 years. The panel hopes that the Assembly gets the true picture of the police force's current funding and future outlook and will support our amendment. While we ask for the funding to be taken from the health budget, we do not wish to have any negative impact on the health service. But as a responsible panel, we have to take funding from where we think is most appropriate. We settled on the health budget for 2 reasons. Firstly, the insufficient police budget, as I've already described, will have an impact on public health. By cutting community policing and the digital forensics unit, we could see an increase in more crime and a greater impact on physical and mental health. Full support for these vital aspects of the police force could well mean less need for some responsive health services. So this is a matter of forward thinking rather than firefighting. Secondly, the health budget at £381 million is the biggest and therefore has the most potential for reassessment. That is a fundamental principle of fiscal management, and we are looking for less than 0.1% of that budget. I do thank the Health Minister for his helpful communications on this matter, but I would have hoped that the government could have come to some sort of agreement in support of this amendment. So to conclude, the aim of this amendment is to supply a small amount of interim funding while the government proceeds with a comprehensive review of the police budget. And I ask the Assembly to support our police force and to vote for this amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, following the debate on the budget of the Environment Department, we are seeking to accept this amendment, and Treasury officials are working on amendments now which will deal with both the environment, the additional funding for the environment and this proposed funding for the police. I would say that it is not likely to come purely from the Health Department and will be shared across a number of departments because that is the only logical way we can do it. But we will be bringing something forward to do that. So, sir, I do have some words to say on the amendment, aside from giving that commitment that we will be looking to accept, sir. So if I may.
Yes, of course.
Sir, we all share the commitment. We recognise the importance that members place in community policing, and we all know that feeling safe is one of the most important factors that makes Jersey such a wonderful place to live and raise a family. As reported by Statistic Jersey's Better Life Index, Jersey ranks first for safety out of 455 regions. This is something we should celebrate. It's not something we should take for granted. The Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, I'm sure, will have something to say on this, and she is conscious of the pressures in police funding and is committed to addressing them in a strategic way. Our police force do an exemplary job in keeping islanders safe, but as with all areas across the public service, are being asked to operate with increasing efficiencies to meet savings requirements. I must stress, however, that it is entirely inappropriate for the Assembly to seek to allocate funds for specific operational purposes. Operational decisions, such as how resources are deployed, are matters for the Chief of Police and his team, and there is no guarantee that by extending additional funding to the police now, it will be spent in any way other than as in the discretion of the Chief of Police. That is what separation of powers is all about, and it is entirely inappropriate for us to interfere with how the police chief makes operational decisions. So that underlies this, our acceptance of that amendment. So next year we will of course be discussing legislative changes to address violence against women and girls. This is an issue we cannot ignore, and it will require more resources. Those needs will be fully analysed and quantified in time for the debate, allowing them to be properly considered in the budget for 2027. That is the right approach, a strategic, system-wide plan which would see resources directed where demand is greatest and capture the implications across the criminal justice system rather than being limited to the police alone. For now, our immediate concern is ensuring that the police have sufficient funding for 2026, and I believe the Chief of Police himself has confirmed he is content with the position for 2026. I have already signed a letter of comfort guaranteeing that they can recruit and train 10 new officers in 2026. We are also planning to use balances in the Criminal Offences Confiscation Fund to invest in technology for digital forensics team. These actions will make a real, meaningful difference to the police budget, and we already have them in hand. As I say, sir, our budget proposes additional allocations to Health and Care Jersey to ensure they can meet their commitments. While the proposed amount removed from the health budget may seem small, it will add to the financial pressures faced by the department, which is already committed to delivering £9 million of savings in 2026. So, sir, while we accept the amendment, it's subject to those caveats, and we will present an amendment sharing the cost of this and the environment funding as soon as we can. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Minister for Justice and Home Affairs.
Thank you, sir. It has been my stated position that police funding has eroded over many years and needs addressing. This was my view as a backbencher and remains my view as the responsible minister. However, I am part of a team and I consider my team player. I know my fellow ministers understood my position in relation to police funding, and perhaps they are sick of hearing it, but I know I have their support, and I have throughout this situation in relation to funding. And in particular, I would like to thank the Social Security Minister and the Minister for Health, because we have worked hard in relation to trying to resolve it. I'm also grateful to the Treasury Minister for providing the possibility of recruiting 10 new police officers by a letter of comfort. And you will be all pleased, sir, that those officers will be joining the force in January, which is a positive thing, because let's remember that all our police officers are community officers, sir, not just those that are put into a community team. It is, sir, a good outcome for myself as well as for the State of Jersey Police that we have been able to, and we are working on this funding. The one thing I would like to comment on, which has already been mentioned by the Treasury Minister, is the operational independence. As a former police officer and now politician and minister, I have a unique perspective of the operational independence of the police, and members will not be surprised it is something which I feel strongly about. And in fact, sir, I actually voted against having state members on the police authority back when it was brought to the Assembly. The fundamental principle is a cornerstone of policing and ensures that the police operate impartially and without undue influence. We must all commit to uphold this. I think the amendment brought by the panel was a good amendment. I do not believe that in bringing this amendment, the panel had any intention to undermine the principle. Far from it, but members must be wary of the precedent this might set. So from my perspective, I would also like to say, sir, that the changes in relation to, I support the changes in relation to the proposal in relation to the community policing team, which will remain dedicated community officers for parishes as part of a team with the offender management unit, who manage individuals living in our community who could pose a risk to public safety. It is a model that has been used in forces elsewhere and will make best use of our community officers in order to maximise public safety. The force have my full support in implementing this change, and I would urge those members who have concerns in relation to that possibility to keep an open mind. So, sir, I am delighted that we are able to find the funding in relation to this, and of course in the new year there will be legislation brought forward. With that legislation, sir, there will be identified the resources that are required for the States of Jersey Police. But let's not forget that it is not only the States of Jersey Police that will need funding in relation to these changes. There will need to be potential funding for the Legal Advisors Department and other agencies that work with victims. So I think we need to, when the legislation comes, that review of resources will be made, and at that time I would look forward to the support of the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Constable Greville.
Yes, sir. I very much would, as Vice Chair of the panel, and I thank the Chair for putting this case forward. At this time, I understand completely that the budget of the police force is an independent one and is adhered to by the police chief. But I would like to pay tribute to the community police officers that operate throughout the island at this time, because they do provide us with a great deal of support in the parishes throughout the island. And I'd like the Minister to pass that on to the police chief, as I'm sure we will have the opportunity to do so. Our police force is running at 50% of its actual capacity at the moment. Island-wide, the honorary police is 57% of its capacity. Some of our parishes, I know my Connotab colleague behind me is running at full, his officers are full, but most parishes are not. And so any support that we can get and do get is very much appreciated. And we see our community police officers at least twice a month. When I pull up into the parish hall and see a police car, sir, I do feel slightly insecure for a few moments, I have to admit. But then I go in and see the wonderful community officers and why they're there to talk to us about any issues we may have. And they give us a great deal of daytime support, sir, because a lot of our officers are actually at work during the day, and they give us a great deal of help. So I'd just like to say that on behalf of my parish. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Tadier.
So I'm slightly concerned by two things, and even though the government has said that they're accepting this amendment, but two things I feel that are necessary to put on record. One's the question around process, the process by which the Chief of Police felt it was necessary to go to a scrutiny panel to say that he ultimately needed more money. If that's the case, I'd like to, or at least that the scrutiny panel feel that they need to bring this. But I'm slightly perplexed as to whether or not the police actually do need more money, and whether, and I'll give an example of the recent court case of Natalie Strecker, which we're allowed to talk about now because it's been concluded, where we have a situation where 5 or 6 police officers, I understand, turn up at a middle-aged woman's house who's not in any way violent or a threat to anybody, minding her own business effectively. And they feel it's a good use of officer time to spare 5 or 6 officers at that time of the morning, early in the morning, to go around and arrest her. I understand, to ultimately still bring her in for questioning, which you'd have probably done voluntarily at that point anyway. And it adds to my concern when I also hear her own comments, which I'll quote now, that I am a care survivor, a survivor of abuse because of the failings of our government and institutions as a child, and I walk out of court today with my head held high. But she did say that the whole process that the police had subject her to, as well as the courts, that this has been personally incredibly traumatic and dehumanising time, compounded by old wounds triggered by the manner in which I was arrested. And I do wonder if this is the same police force that we're talking about that still needs extra funding. And certainly I'm in a very difficult position here because as somebody who traditionally will stand up for frontline services as a proud trade unionist, sir, I do have concerns that the police are pleading poverty when actually they seem to have this excess within their department to be able to put on such excessive force earlier in the morning to arrest ultimately somebody who is proven to be an innocent woman, sir. And I wonder whether actually some of that money will perhaps be used for training about how to deal with care leavers and actually not effectively pursue complaints that I understand were made by possibly one member of the public, in which she was tried under the Jersey system, sir, and ultimately acquitted. How much money did the police waste in that process of this innocent woman that could actually be money that's used that they're asking to get back now for the next year or so? Something doesn't really stack up for me, sir. So certainly I can't support this additional funding when there's been both a waste of money demonstrated by the police, who I think haven't shown that they've learned their lesson. There's been no apology issued, I don't think, by the police for what ultimately was an undue arrest of this innocent woman. But at the same time, I'm not going to press the contra button, because I do believe in our public services, sir. But I do think that there are big questions that need to be answered by the police on this particular case, and the juxtaposition of this proposition that is being brought to the Assembly to ask more money for this police force, which I think still needs to get its house in order in this area, is something which I find very regrettable, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Sir, I'm just speaking in response to Deputy Tadia's comment just now. I'm noting that the court didn't actually criticise the police itself, that there is a complaints process against the police, which any member of the public can actually refer to. And I would like to remind and encourage people to complain where they have the right to complain. And I would encourage this States Assembly to support complaints procedures and their improvement generally, which is why I have been honoured to do the work I've done so far on the Ombudsman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Right, Harbison Hellier.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Scott has got there before me. And as they say, I wasn't going to speak on this debate because the amendment has been accepted. But it is quite wrong for Deputy Taddeo to say the things that he did about the States of Jersey Police Force. Quite wrong. He's doing so because he has privilege to say what he likes, and we know that Deputy Taddeo makes frequent speeches, some of which are relevant, but in a kind of funny way. But the irrelevance of today's speech, I think, was, to my mind, was verging on the malicious. The people he's speaking about have no right of defence, and I think that this Assembly needs to be very careful about those kind of speeches. It reminded me a bit about Deputy Moore's swipe at civil servants who she claimed were ganging up against her when she was Chief Minister. We simply can't use the state's debate, particularly on a budget, to get these kind of personal gripes off our chest. It is not appropriate, and I think that Deputy Taddeo actually should withdraw his remarks because the recent court case that has taken place clearly is a matter that will be investigated and talked about and researched and commented on, but this isn't the place to do it, and I very much regret that he had to make those comments. Thank you, sir.
Right, Harbour St Mary.
Thanks, sir. I withdraw my question, if I may, sir. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon the chair of the panel to reply. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to see that the Council of Ministers has recognised the needs for this interim funding. I'm grateful for that. Of course, the panel understands police independence. It is ultimately for the police chief to decide how to allocate his budget. The fact remains that cuts are being made to community policing and to digital forensics unit because the budget is insufficient. And yes, there are 10 new officers starting in January. They will be in training and not fully ready for 2 years. This amendment simply asks for interim funding while a further review is, I think, going to be carried out to help prevent cuts, which will have an impact. I thank all those who have spoken, and I echo the appreciative comments made by the Connétable of Grouville about the community police officers. And I ask the Assembly to support our police force and vote for the amendment. Thank you.
The appeal has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting.
It's been accepted,
The amendment has been adopted. 36 votes for, 5 votes contra, and 1 abstention.
We have 5.
Yes.
Those members voting contre, Deputies Moore, Balash, Alex Curtis, Wilson and Andrews.
Now move on to the 22nd amendment lodged by Deputy Gardner. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B8. After the words summary tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that A, in summary table 5.1, the head of expenditure for economic development, tourism, sport and culture should be reduced by £200,000. Such funding to be allocated from the budget for arts, heritage and culture. And B, in summary table 5.2, within the section entitled infrastructure, there should be inserted a new row entitled Victoria Marine Lake Repair with an allocation of £400,000 for 2026 and a decrease of £200,000 to the row entitled infrastructure rolling vote and public realm. Page 3, paragraph B12. After the words in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 60, after the words to revitalise St Helier, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. The budget allocates £400,000 for 2026 to provide funding for the specific repair for the Victoria Marine Lake. £200,000 of the funding required to be allocated from the funding for arts, culture and heritage, and £200,000 from the infrastructure rolling vote. The Minister for Treasury Resources will request funding from the States of Jersey Development Company of a further £200,000 to support the repairs in addition to the government funding. Going forward, the Marine Lake will be allocated up to £60,000 per year from the Head of Expenditure for Infrastructure. During 2026, the Minister for Infrastructure will also seek expressions of interest from operators for the site, with any consequential amendments to be reflected as necessary throughout the budget.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. The Victoria Marine Lake, or West Park Bathing Pool, opened in 1897 to mark Queen's Victoria Diamond Jubilee. It is one of our oldest public seawater pools and more recently has been designated Grade 4 listed heritage asset. Yet, despite its historic value and its importance to the community, it has been closed for more than 2 years because it's no longer structurally safe. My amendment proposed something that happened before, co-funding model to repair the lake. It's proportionate, grounded in precedent, and directly aligned with our commitments for supporting community well-being, heritage protection, and revitalizing St Helier. I'm sure that members will be maybe happy to hear that my speech actually will be pretty short, concentrating on 7 points based on comments that we all received from the Council of Ministers. But I assume that members read my report and I don't need to expand more. But I would like to address comments from the Council of Ministers. Number 1. Let me begin by correcting point about listing. And I have spoken with the people who are working in the heritage and who worked as architects. We have been told that listing may increase costs. Might. That misunderstands the purpose of the listing. From my checks, listing identifies a structure's historic or architectural significance. It does not prohibit alteration, does not dictate materials in advance. It's designed to support proposal that preserves or reinforces structure of heritage value. In case of the marine lake, the 20th century concrete capping and reinforcement are part of its historic evaluation. They are essential to resisting marine forces. Removing these elements would accelerate structure failure, and using marine-grade concrete a standard approach worldwide, and both practical and entirely consistent with preserving the character of this unique structure. Number 2. Now let's turn to the objective cost are too uncertain. 600 might not be enough. They might be. Members, I would like, sir, and members to think that uncertainty is the result of an action, not a justification for it. The government held assets for decades, and it has more than 2 years since closure to commission a full, transparent engineering survey. Yet, Minister didn't publish any cost assessment. I have submitted a written question. They said they're commercially confidential. It's understandable. I don't have any problem. But at the same time, if it's commercially understandable, members cannot receive a comment saying that the costs are unknown. Or they are known or they are confidential, but we needed to have some cost over the last 2 years. What I calculated on publicly available benchmarking information, restoration in 2014, plus inflation, plus deterioration. Third, we have heard that repairs should not be done now, and we shouldn't focus to make it safe. Now, actually, I need to again thank you for the infrastructure minister, because 65,000 has been spent in 2025, and I received photos from the group that saying, looks good progress was made, given tides. I can only guess that was achieved in less than 10 days on the site. But we all know that it's not enough. Important not to stop money. Money spent now does not reduce the future bill and does not return the asset to the community. Money spent now that does not reduce that money spent now, we need to ensure that they will not be deteriorated and will continue and will repair, and the residents and visitors can enjoy swimming in 2026. Number 4. We have been told that usage was low after 2014 and there is no public case. It's actually factually incorrect. Since closure, public engagement has been remarkable. Not many petitions gathered over 1,500 signatures in 6 weeks. Hundreds have participated in dozens participated in meetings. They came to talk to me. They came to have around 50 people came to talk to the minister and the constable, or the writing to the members. Islanders across all generations, and interestingly enough, particularly old residents, have explained the health, heritage, and well-being benefits of the pool. This is, I think, one of the most publicly discussed community issues. I know there are several others, but mandate is clear. We did have a clear petition. Fifth, Minister say that neither the infrastructure rolling road nor heritage fund can be used. Yet, the budget itself defines rolling road as funding for sea defences, public realm, and vital infrastructure. The marine lake and marine wall is, I would say, all three. The heritage spending is assessed under UNESCO categories, which include protection of listed structures. If restoring grade 4 listed public pool does not qualify as a heritage protection, I'm not sure what would. 6. Ministers urged that SOJDC should not contribute, but SOJDC did contribute 100,000 in 2014 for restoration under the same remit. This amendment that simply repeats successful precedent combining government, parish, and SOJDC co-funding model that delivered real public value. The objection ignores both history and practically. And I would also challenge, if the Victoria Marine Lake is not part of the SOJDC waterfront ambition, it's a question where we have a joint thinking. Finally, ministers should wait for expression of interest. I welcome that will be expression of interest 26, but to be clear, I asked engagement back in September from the Joint Property Holding because there were operators that approached me actively. The ideas run from various things that can actually revitalize there and bring life back to that area which is loved by and used by thousands of islanders. Members, doing nothing is the most expensive option. Each winter, more of the walls are lost. Each delays increase repair cost. Each year, indecision future undermines the chance of community partnership. I believe this co-funding that everyone can participate protects heritage assets, support public health, enhance the waterfront, and restore cherished community resource. I'm looking to hear members' views, and I'll move the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded? Thank you. Minister for Infrastructure.
Thank you, sir. So first I'd like to thank Deputy Gardner for her engagement with me in recent months regarding the Victoria Marine Lake. We've had a number of helpful and constructive discussions, and Deputy Gardner was good enough to meet me before lodging this amendment, and I appreciate that courtesy. When I attended a public meeting about the Victoria Marine Lake on the 4th of September, a well-attended meeting, which Deputy Gardner organised, I said then that my priority was to make the structure safe and then to look at its full repair. Sir, my position hasn't changed. My first priority is safety. I've got a moral obligation to do that and a legal obligation to do that. That is why we've spent some £65,000 this year on the structure, which I have to say is in a very poor condition at present, and we will need to spend more next year to make it even stronger. I emphasise, though, that until we undertake a full repair of the marine lake, the site won't be completely safe. Sir, as the tide comes up on a rough day, sir, any day, it could make holes in that wall. In due course, sir, we can look at making the marine lake operational again, but there are a number of variables in that respect which, in my view, this amendment unfortunately jumps ahead of. There are some islanders who are passionate about the Victoria Marine Lake and want it to be repaired and operational again as soon as possible. Many of those were amongst the 1,700 who signed a petition on the subject, and their voices have been heard. Equally, sir, I've been stopped in the street by a number of people who have told me not to spend another penny on this site and to focus on other priorities. As I find out all too often in this job, sir, there's nothing like consensus. Earlier this year, my officers in Property Holdings procured estimates costs for the repair of the marine lake. We didn't and don't have the funding available, but we had an idea of what would be needed to repair the structure. Subsequently, however, the marine lake has been given a Grade 4 listing, which does change the nature of the work that can be carried out and the way it must be carried out. And whilst I recognise that we'll be able to replace concrete with concrete, sir, the ability to do that in other areas, I'm told, is limited. This means that a new estimate needs to be sought. Inevitably, that estimate will now very likely be more expensive, and for commercial confidence reasons, we have not published detailed figures, but as we've said in the Commons paper, we now think it is reasonable to believe that even the Deputy's request for £600,000 might not be sufficient for this project. Arguably, the worst outcome would be an insufficient budget for the work and setting ourselves up to fail from the outset. Our first priority in this respect must therefore be to acquire new, realistic costings for the repair of the now Grade 4 listed structure. There is more to this though, sir. I remind members that the marine lake, as the deputies pointed out, was repaired in 2014 with over £300,000 of public money, and the Baudet Foundation were licensed to operate the lake. Unfortunately, sir, the site failed. Public usage was low, primarily because of the sea lettuce in the bay, which regularly filled the pool, and the Baudet Foundation withdrew from operating the site. Some might argue, sir, that we've been here before and we should learn from past mistakes. I am conscious of that. But I also, sir, met with those swimmers who use the site regularly, who live in and around the West Park area and swim all year round. Therefore, accept Deputy Gardener's request for us to undertake an expressions of interest process for the Victoria Marine Lake, and I think the Deputy is aware we have spoken to someone who had previously expressed an interest. So if we can find an independent or private party interested in running the site in the long term, and whether there might be some private funding available to support its repair. This in itself will help us to confirm if 60,000 is the correct figure for annual maintenance. This amendment runs ahead of all of that work. There is a separate but related question, particularly in terms of this amendment, as to whether public money is best spent at all on the Victoria Marine Lake. As I've said, that is a matter of varying opinions. But certainly in 2026, the effect of reallocating this money would be to the detriment of higher priority core infrastructure and public realm investment, especially in St Helier. This is a £2.5 million budget which is already under pressure from inflation and has existing commitments on it, including for parish neighbourhood improvement areas at the request of Deputy Gardener. Once we know the cost for repairing the lake, sir, and if it is deemed a viable project in view of competing priorities, we can identify an appropriate funding source which doesn't put at risk other key infrastructure projects. I will leave others to comment on the proposal to utilise money from the Arts, Culture and Heritage Fund and from the State of Jersey Development Company. The comments paper sets out the Council Minister's position in respect of both. So in asking members to reject this amendment, ministers are not dismissing it out of hand. I'm not dismissing it out of hand. I'm saying the amendment is just a bit too early and that we've got some work to do first. That work, and notably the new costings for the repair and the expressions of interest process, will commence early next year. With that commitment and in view of my remarks, I ask members to vote against the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Point of clarification, have you got?
Yes, point
Prepared
of
to give way
clarification.
to point of clarification? Yes, Deputy.
Would the Minister advise, does he anticipate that the residents and visitors will be able to swim this summer?
Minister.
Sir, residents and visitors have been able to swim at all times, sir, but we've asked them to do so with caution, sir. It depends on the state of the tide. So if the tide is outgoing, then the risk becomes far greater for anybody in the water. And so we've done our very best to repair holes and will continue to do so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Constable St Clement.
So there is potential for investment in this area by private enterprise, but also there's an opportunity, I think, with some different ideas regarding the seaside, whereby property services could commercialise the area and suit up the marine lake with the inland opportunity that is quite barren, which used to be the old cafe in the circular area. You have to be mindful of the weather and wind and rain and storms, but beach huts can be leased and rented, and a small cafe could be built in that area, which is something I thought about only last week. I have to lay down the principle that I'm not interested in that myself. So before Facebook gets overexcited, etc., this is an idea I give to property services through the infrastructure minister. Beach huts are a very old-fashioned idea, but they operate all the way along the south coast and even up as far north as Scotland. I wouldn't sell them, I would rent them, and I would make them worthy enough that they can stand a certain amount of pressure from storms and high tides. But if you made a run of 10 to 12 of them up above on the seawall and had access and changed the seawall whereby on one hand you had a slope potentially for beach mobility to make their headquarters with their mobility hut, and you provided a small cafe and perhaps also an information centre, you could rent all of that out, and that would potentially pay for the general upkeep of the Victoria Lake. But as I say, I give that to the members as an idea, and I can't overstate that I'm not interested in taking it on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Expenditure.
So, when I first heard of the idea of revamping the marine lake, I was certainly open-minded and in principle interested to potentially support it. I've spoken to some people, including a gentleman in St Bernard who I referenced earlier on, I think yesterday, who told me that as a young boy he used to play in it, but he said, for goodness sake, don't spend any more money on that, it's just not viable. And there's a reason it's fallen into disrepair, and with the recent tidal changes that may have occurred from the reclamation, it's just not going to work. And I did take that on board because I think he had experience and much more longer memory than I do. So whilst I'm welcome, I think it's probably right that the Minister does look at whether this is ultimately viable. My question back to him is that how much is that interim study going to cost to find out if we're in a position? And also, what is the implication for the grade 4 listing on this? It does make me think, and I don't want to speak from a position that sounds like I'm anti-heritage, but sometimes I do feel that we get I can feel the public getting exasperated when they think, why would you put a listing, albeit a grade 4, on a dilapidated swimming pool which is no longer functioning and which has been patched together over the decades? The grade 4 listing criteria, sir, here says that buildings, places of special public and heritage interest to Jersey being good example of a particular historical period and architectural style. Well, it might be an example of a Victorian swimming pool, but it's not a good example of a Victorian swimming pool, is it? It's a bad example of one because it's not been maintained. And I would ask, some strange things have been said, so you can only swim in this currently when the tide's coming up. How does that work then? So you wait for it to be full, and for the tide to be coming up still when you can swim in it, when the tide will be there anyway, so you could swim anywhere along that beach. You don't have to swim in the pool. The whole point of the pool is that you need to be able to swim in it when the tide is going out or the tide's not there, because you'd have to walk out on the very long and slow gradient beach there. And the other point is, if you just wait 6 hours, then you can swim anyway. In Jersey, just wait 6 hours. You've got a pool ready to go, it's called the sea. And you can swim along the whole of St Albans Beach, if you want to, if you think it's clean enough and you don't mind the seaweed. So I would be much more interested actually to figure out, do we have a body that we give these kind of developments to? If only there was some kind of body that delivered projects for Jersey's government, maybe if it was called the Development Company or something like that, or the Jersey Development Company, and it had projects that down on the waterfront that it was looking into. And maybe if the pool wasn't actually quite far out at sea with nothing around it, no amenities, but if it was built close in so you didn't even have to leave the land side and you could just jump into the pool. And I'm thinking probably like at Dinar. I've been to Dinar recently. I go there now and again with my wife, and they've got a lovely pool at the back. It's circular and it's very well used and it's full all the time and it's well maintained, sir. And so I do think that I think that part of St Helier is crying out for a seawater pool that can be used all year round. That's probably deep enough, and that could be, have lanes that you can swim in, possibly even diving boards. The imagination can run wild. And I just don't know if it's a good use to try and rebuild that marine lake. It's a great idea, and I don't knock anyone who has ideas. I just think that there's perhaps something better on this occasion that we could be putting even the preliminary money into. So maybe if the Minister could talk to whether he thinks even the small funds that he's looking at the moment could actually be put to better use elsewhere.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. And I rise to speak as representative of St Helier Central, and I just want to explain my voting position on this particular amendment. I have sympathy for where the Deputy is coming from, and as somebody that lives in town and has West Park Beach as my local beach, of course I'd love to imagine Victoria Marine Lake go back to its former glory, but I do have concerns around this amendment, and that's around viability and feasibility. So I was comforted to hear the words of the Infrastructure Minister I know that he is committed, and he has regular conversations with me when it comes to the summer months about the green stuff that we find on the beach. And for me, that is a much more pressing issue, because at the moment, we can't use the sea when the tide is up. At the moment, a lot of people don't feel that they can use that sea. So for me, that is the pressing issue for the West Park area. But I do want to address a couple of people who have talked about putting life back into West Park. West Park at the summer is teeming with life. When you go at sunset to the slipway and around the Fregat area, it is absolutely full of local families that live in St Helier, trying to enjoy the beach. And this is where, for me, the priority isn't necessarily the marine lake, but ensuring that our beach facilities, that our beach is usable. And I thank the Minister for Infrastructure, because I know that he has worked quite hard to make more areas of that beach accessible to families by the work that he and his team have done in removing as much green seaweed as they possibly can. But also, it is important that we have family-friendly activities there as well. And I do want to impress upon the Assembly that this is a very, very well-used area. And that's in spite of the current state of the marine lake. So for me, the issue here for this amendment is viability and feasibility. I don't think it's the right step to take right now, and I fully support the Minister for Infrastructure in his efforts to see what the best way forward is going to be, and I'd be more than happy to work with the Minister and Deputy Gardner and our other local deputies in that respect. So I will be voting against this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And I kind of want to start where Deputy Tadje also hinted at is, you know, the danger here in when you want to say what I see is to me, something which is fairly obvious, but I am not anti-heritage. I'm very pro-Jersey's heritage. Jersey's heritage is something that I engage with all the time and I value and promote. But sometimes you have to let things go. And I think one of the dangers that we have in this island is that we just don't want to let things go. The Victoria Marine Lake was set up in 1897, and I thank Deputy Gardner for alerting me to that in her report. But it's set up with a purpose. Jersey had a growing and, burgeoning tourism sector. It had links to the UK, particularly, that it hadn't had before, via train in the UK to the ports, Weymouth, etc., and then coming to Jersey. And the Marine Lake, to enable people to swim there throughout the day, I can really understand how that would have been of huge benefit to the island. But it's now 130 years later. And the truth is not many people use it. And I know there are some, and I know 1,700 people signed a petition. And I know there will be some who say, I use it X amount of times a week or a month or a day. But the vast, vast majority of islanders never, ever use that lake. They go swimming in the sea. Some people have their own swimming pools. There is the Lido, obviously, at Half Day Park, which is another effectively marine lake, which people use as well. I completely agree with Deputy Felton. I go to West Park through the summer, and it is full of life. So there is no question of the area being devoid of kind of human life. It's fantastic sitting on it's not even the seawall, I don't know how you describe it, the big concrete kind of blocks that make up the wall. And there's people drumming, there's people singing. It's absolutely amazing area. And that's without a functioning marine lake. And I do worry when we're talking about the constraints on expenditure, and they're constraints which affect developing the economy. They affect developing education, developing health, etc., developing policing, things like this. And yet we know there are these constraints, but we're talking about spending probably far in excess of £400,000, maintaining a structure which was a functional structure primarily. It's not being made to look beautiful because it's not intended to be an aesthetic structure, it's a functional structure. And we're talking about maintaining it in perpetuity. Well, if it was £300,000 in 2014, and from the infrastructure minister's indication, it's going to be at least £600,000 now, if not a lot more, what will it be in 50 years' time? What will it be in 60, 70, 80 years' time? It's going to be many millions and millions of pounds just to maintain something. And then the icing on the cake, and obviously it's planned, so it may never come to fruition, is that my understanding of current waterfront plans puts an open-air swimming pool right next to the Victoria Marine Lake. So we'd have one open-air pool full of seawater next to another open-air pool, which to me, again, just makes no sense. So I won't even refer to the taking it from the Arts, Culture and Heritage budget. I don't think it's relevant. I think as a States Assembly, we need to start to draw lines and just say, we can't afford this. It's served its purpose. It is time to let it go safely. So I do support the Infrastructure Minister in maintaining that structure from a safe perspective. But unless there is a real way forward in the way that the Councillor St Clement has suggested, where there is a way to kind of pass it over to a private sector who can somehow fund it and make money, I just don't think it should be a priority of the States Assembly now or at any point in the future to maintain what will always be a structure in the sea that is being eroded, beaten, battered and pulled apart by the elements for something which we have plenty of provision for swimming in this island, whether it's on the beach, in people's swimming pools, in public swimming pools or future swimming pools yet to be built. So I do urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Treasury Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I would just like to make a few points regarding Estates of Jersey Development Company. Firstly, the funding from SOJDC as proposed by Deputy is by no means certain. And even if it was taken from JDC, it has a number of unintended consequences. So yes, in the great scheme of things, the sum involved is relatively small. However, the proposed funding from SOJDC establishes a potentially unhelpful and damaging precedent whereby the reserves of SOJDC, or indeed any states-owned entity, may be targeted for the spending plans of government or to meet the objectives of individual members. This is particularly relevant when the development works are quite clearly outside the remit of SOJDC, as the comments paper demonstrates. It must also be borne in mind that a dividend, as contemplated by the amendment, can only be requested by a shareholder and would only be paid if the Board of Directors are satisfied that the company will remain solvent after payment of the dividend, or at least able to meet its own objectives. We must remember that directors must act in the best interests of the company. The directors will be cognisant of the impact a dividend will have on the company's future plans and commitments. So all these legal considerations reinforce the point that the Deputy's amendment does not have certainty around the funding. The comments paper does demonstrate that there are tangible implications for SOJDC's future plans if the dividend is paid. The regeneration allocation has already been earmarked and fully allocated to the initial planning development works for Fort Regent. Alternatively, the reserves from historic profits are planned for reinvestment in future investment projects, including the South Hill development, the waterfront and future IFC buildings. Each development is financed partly from the reserves of SOJDC and the balance from third-party lending, so pulling dividends from the reserves means less equity for SOJDC to finance their own developments. So notwithstanding the legal issues and the harmful precedent this would create, I would suggest to the Assembly that we do not want to hamstring SOJDC from continuing to progress their development programme, which all islanders will ultimately be able to benefit from. In closing, it would be worth reminding ourselves that the Regeneration Steering Group has political oversight over SOJDC and its activities. Through the guidance provided by the RSG, SOJDC has already delivered significant public realm improvements that sit squarely within its remit. So for these reasons, I can't support the amendment and I ask members to reject. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Breniff.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to support this amendment, but I did want to say a few words, possibly unfashionably, in the defence of the listing process and the heritage protections that we have in this island. There is a sort of assumption, unwritten assumption in some of the comments that have been made that listing means nothing can happen to a structure, that it will be preserved as it is for all time. Listing is a recognition that that a building or structure or place is of significance, is of historical and heritage significance. It asks us to consider what we might do before we take action. And I think that is part of what a modern society should do. We have various conventions that we've signed up to that says we will protect heritage assets. We have an independent process for determining them. It's on the recommendation of advisors at Jersey Heritage. And there's a graded system for deciding how significant and sometimes what parts of a structure are significant. And I think that is something of incredible value to the island. It is always the case that listing will appear in some circumstances to some people to be an obstacle to development that might want to take place. All that listing does, it doesn't say it will never happen. It calls attention to the significance and says, if you're going to do something with this, you must justify it. You must explain why the plans you have are sufficiently advantageous that they should overrule that heritage interest. I must say, in my own case, for my own personal opinion, with the marine lake, I may well err on the side of those who feel it has outlived its purpose. But I would certainly want to give it a lot of consideration. I would certainly want to read the heritage listing and look at the factors that had led to it being listed. And I think it would be a shame if the Assembly took those issues lightly. I'm sure members don't really feel that, but I just detected a hint of that in some of the contributions, and I do want to stand in defence of that listing system and make those points. But as I say, in this case, I won't be supporting the amendment because I think on the substantive issues, the arguments that the government has made are strong.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I won't add too much to what's been said already. Certainly in terms of the utility value of the marine lakes, times have changed. There's also the question of how much money you really can put into supporting heritage. One thing that strikes me is that I know a very passionate group of people would like us to be putting more money in German bunkers, for example, which will really could be of historical interest going forwards. But again, how much can you really support things in this area? I wanted really to focus on the commercial opportunity. The Constable of St Clement mentioned beach huts. In fact, that's something that's been mentioned in the context of St Brellard's Bay at the time that the wayside development wasn't developed for tourism, but that was something that somebody said, isn't it really strange we don't have these in the island? But the real thing here is the whole kind of issue of private investment that we should be seeking and the obstacles to that. And in this particular case, one particular one that has been identified by Deputy Feltham already, and indeed in the Council Minister's report, is sea letters. And I think I might invite Deputy Gardner to perhaps think a bit higher in terms of the logical level and whether there is more to be had in the discussion with the Minister for Infrastructure here, because sea lettuce affects St Brelard as well and its visitor economy. And I know at one point there was a campaign group, Safe Ash Shoreline, who was even suggesting that maybe the answer was to have oyster beds in St Albans Bay. I don't really know what's happened in terms of exploring the feasibility of that, but if you are perhaps thinking, well, maybe we could go for private investment and looking at the obstacles in the way, that might be something to explore. In the meantime, I won't be supporting this amendment for the reasons given by others.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. It's interesting because so there's a lovely phrase I like, which means someone has more than a corner of the truth. And I have to say, I think Deputy Morell, and I don't often say this, to be honest, about the Deputy, but he has more than a corner of the truth here when he talks about heritage and what we have to do. So it's very interesting to have the debate because, as well, sir, I don't think this Deputy, the Constable of St Clement's, because I go to that area a lot. I walk along the area most days and along the seafront there. And I think the idea of the beach huts is a really good idea, and I think it could be extended further. I think this is what we need for that area, a really joined up approach, not just one isolated area because of its heritage or not, but the whole area there in terms of what we can provide for people who live in that area, because that beach is such an important beach for St Helier as a whole. I must also raise the issue of sea lettuce, and I think the Minister for Infrastructure may have received quite a few emails from myself as well, and it's over sea lettuce over the years, because it makes the beaches unusable for a significant length of time, and we have to address that. I don't know how a company would function there in the summer months when it would be most important months for any business with the sea lettuce as it is, because that's when it blooms. And I think so the combination of factors that lead to that bloom will not be enhanced by doing any work down there. So I don't think it's going to affect it at all. I would also say, sir, that as a St Helier deputy, anything that would get in the way, sir, of the development of the improvement zones and the realm itself, I cannot support. We need to get those zones and those realms improved as quickly as we possibly can for the residents of St Helier. So I am concerned about that. And subsequently, sir, I cannot support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Conor St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I've been asked to point out a couple of things. Firstly, that £250,000 a year is spent on the clean-up of sea lettuce. And as Deputy Feltham rightly observed, it's the summer sea lettuce that is the problem for thousands of people who would otherwise be swimming. Not everybody is a hardy winter swimmer, like me. A lot of people wait for the warmer water, which is, of course, when the blooms happen. And I think that really must be a priority. It is, of course, to answer Deputy Rob Ward, that is why the 2014 scheme failed. The government, the parish, SOGDC put a lot of money into the restoration. Bode was ready to run it, lots of exciting plans, and the next summer you couldn't move in that sea for sludge and decomposing sea lettuce. So that's a really obvious practical problem involved in spending a lot of money on restoring the marine lake. However, the blooms, the sea lettuce is only there for relatively few months of the year. And if there are hundreds, even more, thousands of people to the west of St Helier, people for whom the Lido is a bit of a trek, who want to navigate Victoria Avenue and go for a swim in February, the sea lettuce won't be a problem. But safety must be the priority, and I think the Minister for Infrastructure is to be congratulated for recognising the problem. We've been down there together with officers. We've seen the large holes that create a vortex when the tide is going out that would be fatal to anyone who is swimming in the vicinity. And it's absolutely right that steps have been taken to get those holes plugged. But how long will they be plugged for? They may well reopen in the new year, hopefully not when the New Year swim is taking place in the area. So we really have to get the safety right. And if that means putting rock armour around the structure, which I might well do, I'm not an engineer, but a civil engineer, but that would seem to me a good solution, to put rock armour right around the whole thing. It wouldn't look very nice. It certainly wouldn't be consistent with the listing by Heritage, but it might mean that the thing could be held up for another decade or so. But with rising sea levels, what is the long-term future of this facility? It's got to be pretty short. And so I draw comfort from the fact that Jersey Development Company do have ambitious plans for a 50-metre seawater pool in the area when they get their plans approved, if they get their plans approved to further regenerate that part of the waterfront. It's difficult, I think, for St Helier deputies. It's difficult for the constable of St Helier to say no to this project, to this amendment. But of course, it's also a problem for me that Deputy Gardner wants to take the money from a very small budget for the public realm. Anyone who was in town for the recent switch on of the Christmas lights or the Battle of Flowers Christmas parade will have been struck by how the new public realm in Newcut, coming round into Broad Street, it was so exploited by thousands of people who came to town to see the switch on. And there's no question about it that the public realm investment equally in Halkett Street is making a material difference to people who live in town, people who come to town for work, people who visit Jersey. So to take that money away and spend it on a structure which may well be broken down by the next big storm, I think would not be wise. And my final comment is about beach huts. I think beach huts are great, and I think there are places, particularly in the Halfter Park area, where you could have beach huts, but I really wouldn't put them at West Park. The last big storm, I remember, the stones were flying across the wall. They took off the coping stones, which require a digger to lift. They took those off, and a few well-placed bits of granite through the beach huts. That'll be the end of that project as well. So I think we need to focus on the here and now. The Minister has agreed to carry out further work to see what the cost will be of repairs, whether it's feasible. I think we would need to wait and see those reports and wait and see how much it would cost either to take the structure down or to make the structure safe for the next decade or so. So I urge members to vote against the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for members for contributing. I would like to address a couple points, and regardless the outcome of this vote, which I think it's pretty clear where it's going, actually I'm really proud that we do debate it, because I do represent at least 1,700 parishioners who want this to happen. We can dismiss it, but not many petitions raise these numbers. And actually, I do represent my parishioners as a St Helier deputy, which don't have, not many of St Helier parishioners have private swimming pools. And not many of St Helier parishioners have St Brolad's Bay that gentleman talked about, or other beautiful beaches that we have in countryside. I will not apologize that St Helier actually do want to have a safe swimming. And unfortunately, West Park and anything connected to Victoria Avenue, we need to walk probably for 2 miles before the west part of St Helier can go safely to swim at any time of the day. So this is why people signed the petition and asked to be considered. Interestingly enough, if we're going again about the St Helier, or it's not responsible to, no, understand ministers has priorities. Absolutely. Where the minister's priority was when we signed off from strategic reserve above 3 million to buy Crève de Lac. How many of us swam in Crève de Lac? But I understand we have the Chief Minister that also the parishioners demanding to have Crève de Lac for them, but they're not St. Helier parishioners. Now, actually this amendment does talk about joint up approach, join with the businesses. I'm really grateful for St. Clement, for the Constable of St. Clement's. He brought some new ideas, and actually people who approached me and talked about options for inflatable park, they were not worried about much to Seletas. I'll address Seletas in a minute. Inflatable water park that are working across different places, and it's deep enough if it's proper secure, and it's big enough. We have kayaks there. The children could train to do kayaking in one time. Yes, thank you for Deputy Ranov, because Deputy Ranov actually raised a valid point. The heritage, it's not the restriction. It's just a suggestion to reflect what does it give. So to joint up approach, it can be between businesses and others. Now, sea lettuce, absolutely, sea lettuce, we do have a problem across the island. 250,000 was to clean the sea lettuce. But if somebody operating the site, they don't need to wait for all this time because it's daily. They need to create the place that will be clean, and it's only for 3 months. And there are lots of parishioners who came to the meeting, said they actually swim even with sea lettuce, but most of the time they swim without sea lettuce. Sea pool from SOJDC, and actually let's talk about SOJDC. I love what we said. SOJDC, the whole idea, it was said 14 years ago, to deliver regeneration of St. Helier. How it's not in the remit of SOJDC, it's beyond me. And another thing, that Treasury Minister used hamstrung SOJDC by £200,000. Wow. We have £200,000 that will hamstrung SOJDC. They cannot contribute. Constable mentioned, and others mentioned, oh, St. Helier, you would have a open sea water swimming pool. When? And would it be for free? Because most of the stuff that SOJDC does, it's not for free. We need to pay, children need to pay, parents need to pay. And actually, if we are investing 200, 400 million, restoring and bringing private investment to maintain and operate the site, we would have 24/7 for all St. Helier parishioners and visitors and somebody who would like to come along to swim for free when they wish. And it's absolutely right that people cannot swim when the tides are out because it's not safe, it's not secured. I think that I will close here. Islanders have been clear. They want this to be reopened. When we cannot find, well, we could find millions to other projects, but we struggle to commit a fraction of these assets to overwhelming public support. I'm asking for the appel and ask members to consider how they would like to vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce that the amendment has been rejected. 2 votes pour, 41 votes contre, and 2 abstentions.
Could we have the 2 and the 2, please?
Those members voting for, Deputies Doublé and Gardner. Those members who abstained, Deputies Wall and Wilson.
The next matter listed for debate is the 34th Amendment. Chair of the Committee, do you still propose that matter?
Yes, sir. I propose it, but would
ask that it be withdrawn on the basis of a letter recently received in the last hour from the Treasury Minister confirming that the state's GREF will be provided with funds via underspends to support the costs. We would just agree to that based on the fact that under the elections law, the state has to meet the additional costs of a Sunday election. So I would ask that it be withdrawn, sir.
Thank you very much. The next matter to consider is the 28th Amendment, lodged by Deputy Wilson. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Sir, may I propose the adjournment? Considering there's only 10 minutes left, it might be best for the proposer to be given the opportunity to maybe come back tomorrow and so we can
Mood seems
start
to be
afresh.
against that. Do you want to vote on it? Do you want to withdraw the proposition? We can have a debate if you want to on it.
Yeah, we can have a debate on it. Yes, absolutely, sir. Yeah.
Is that seconded? No. Right. So I ask the greffier to...
So before you do that, just because there's been a break, I'd still quite like to know if I could seek the leave to debate my amendment to my amendment. I think we're going to go over... we won't finish
do that now instead, do you?
Can we do that now, so just so I know whether...
content to do that now instead? Needs to be done.
Not instead, but I just think if we could just...
Well, the greffier was about to read the 28th Amendment, but Deputy Tadiant needs to propose that the lodging period be reduced in relation to the amendment to his 33rd Amendment. I was content to deal with that quickly? Yes, Deputy Tadiant.
If I can just explain very quickly what's happening. So I've put my own amendment in to remove Gérier to put Gérier back in so it's included in the 1%. And I've come to an accommodation, we should call it, with the ministers about what else can be put in. So effectively the Jersey Music Service would come under the 1%, which I'm happy to accept, but not Jersey Libraries and not the Community Compass. And I think that's a good compromise, and it clearly defines what constitutes arts, culture and heritage for the next few years, I would hope at least. And with that in mind, I just
Will this save a debate, will it?
It would save it, yes, sir. So it would be proposed. I would propose.
Just wondering if members interested.
That's the headline, sir. So it means that I think I'd still have to propose my amendment as amended with the minister's amendment, and it would be accepted, and it wouldn't need a long debate, sir.
Is that proposal to reduce lodging period seconded?
Yes, sir.
Anyone wish to speak on the proposal to reduce lodging period? All those in favour, kind. Oh, Deputy Tadia, Deputy Morell, you want to speak about it?
Yes, please, sir.
Yes,
just because I appreciate there is some confusion. The greffier may nod or otherwise, but I understand the Council Minister's amendment to Deputy Tadia's amendment is still with the gref. And so whilst we can debate, and propose the reduced lodging period for Deputy Tadia's amendment, I don't think we can do that yet for the Council Minister's amendment because it's not been published. So we will still be having another shortening of the lodging period proposal tomorrow for this subject, just to let members know. So.
Thank you very much. Deputy Alex Curtis, wish to speak?
Thank you, sir. Just very quickly, I didn't realise that we were going to have a habit of negotiating the budget to the last minute. I don't think it's a bad thing that we're doing this. Perhaps if I'd known, I perhaps would have also brought things and reduced the lodging period. So perhaps in thinking about this, a genuine thought, we'll think about whether our lodging periods are still relevant for the way we can negotiate to get the best out of politics here, sir. So just want to think about it.
Deputy Scott.
Sir, I would prefer to debate both requests at the same time because they both relate to the same subject matter, the Council Ministers and Deputy Tadia's amendment.
Well, we can't debate amendments not before us because the amendment that you haven't lodged. We can only debate this now, which is the reduction of lodging period in relation to this particular amendment.
So it's with the gref.
It's not been approved for lodging. I've not seen it. It's not been approved for lodging. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition that we reduce lodging period in relation to the amendment to the 33rd Amendment? I call upon Deputy Tadia to reply.
Yeah, thanks, sir. It may be slightly clumsy timing, and I should have probably done this earlier on in the day. I was expecting to do it earlier. It's simply to say that my amendment was going in anyway, irrespective of any further conversations that then happened with the ministers. And I think there was value to that amendment, which I'll be happy to explain later if need be. So I'm grateful if members would agree now, and then when the further amendment is submitted, then obviously it would make sense to approve that if members are content tomorrow. So thank you.
Those in favour of lodging period being reduced, kindly show. Thank you very much. The lodging period is reduced. And that matter can be debated. The greffier will now read the 28th Amendment.
Page 4, paragraph B8. After the words in Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Table 5.1, the head of expenditure for the Central Reserve should be decreased by £525,000 to be allocated from the growth bid funding for assisted dying, and the head of expenditure for health and care Jersey should be increased by £525,000 to be allocated to the funding line for respite care. Page 3, paragraph B12. After the words, as set out in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 42 in table 9, 1, the head of expenditure for Central Reserve should be decreased by £525,000 in 2026, £727,000 in 2027, £688,000 in 2028, and £718,000 in 2029, with funding allocated from the growth allocation for assisted dying. And 2, the revenue head of expenditure for health and care Jersey should be increased by £525,000 in 2026, £727,000 in 2027, £688,000 in 2028, and £718,000 in 2029, funding to be allocated to respite care, with any consequential amendments to be reflected as necessary throughout the budget.
Thank you, Wilson.
Sir, can I propose the adjournment? I feel that it is a little unfair to ask somebody to speak very last thing when everybody's tired. So my limited time in the Assembly, we've generally adjourned in this situation in the past. And I think for a person who has an unlimited time to speak, actually, should she wish to use it, I think it would be fairer to resume the debate tomorrow and have a clean debate right from the beginning.
Is that seconded? Yes. Do members wish to adjourn? The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.